At a bank outside Los Angeles, a nighttime explosion that no one hears. Cunning criminals no one sees. It's the perfect burglary in which cash and bandits vanish without a trace. With little to go on, the FBI must use instinct and determination to solve a case that seems impossible to crack.
Bank robbery is a brazen yet simple crime. A mask, a gun, a note passed to a teller. But bank burglary is different. It takes skill to disable an alarm, to penetrate a locked vault. I'm Jim Kallstrom, former head of the FBI's New York office. In 1972, the largest bank burglary in U.S. history went down without a hitch. $8 million gone. Now agents must track a gang of sophisticated criminals with enough money to disappear forever.
Laguna Niguel, California, March 27th, 1972. It's Monday morning at the United California Bank. Employees prepare to open for business. When the bank manager tries to unlock the vault door, it won't open.
Somebody call the safe company.
A technician from the vault manufacturer arrives 20 minutes later to check the door's locking system. He works for hours. The combination is right, the tumblers are in place, but unexplainably, even the expert can't get it open.
It's not working.
Looking for another way in, the technician climbs into the rafters above the vault. He is stunned to find a hole cut in the roof. Below, a second gaping hole leading to the vault. Agents from the FBI Santa Ana resident agency immediately respond to the bank. The first investigator to survey the cluttered crime scene is Special Agent Jim Conway.
Upon arriving and getting up on the vault and looking down at this hole, we could see a pile of rubble, I would say 6 feet tall and expanding out.
Once inside the vault, the technician discovers a screwdriver jammed into the lock's gears. Agents suspect the thieves wanted to delay the discovery of the crime. The place is a disaster.
My first impression was there was going to be a lot of time and effort needed to work this out. It was something we couldn't just plow into because we had a crime scene. We were able to walk in, a few of us, and look around and see what the extent was as best we could determine. But we're walking over watches and rings and valuables and everything else because it was all piled into this big cement mess.
Special Agent Frank Calley begins sorting through the chaos.
Just everything was thrown all over the place. There, the locks of hair, all kinds of check statements, photographs, things that people would normally put in a safety deposit box. I remember seeing urns with ashes of deceased people in there.
The agents begin the arduous task of determining how the burglars entered the seemingly impenetrable vault. They notice dark soil and pieces of burlap mixed with the cement rubble. Outside, they find the bank's audible alarm disabled. They also find a ladder. Interpreting the clues, investigators piece together the burglars' intricate plan to breach the vault. They disabled the alarm by injecting it with liquid styrofoam. It hardened, freezing the clapper in place and rendering the alarm useless. Then the burglars climbed onto the roof. Investigators find tape on a rooftop outlet, suggesting the burglars used the bank's electricity. When agents cannot find fingerprints on the tape, they conclude the burglars wore gloves. Fully powered, the burglars sawed a 4-foot opening into the roof.
Good, good. All right, we're in.
Once inside the rafters, they clearly knew how to bypass the interior silent alarm system.
They took a couple of the wires and that would have normally transmitted the alarm signal, and they clipped them both and soldered them together.
It was delicate, highly skilled work.
Knew right away they were smart. They did the homework.
Even with the alarm disabled, 16 inches of steel-reinforced concrete stood between the burglars and the contents of the vault. The only way through, an intensely powerful blast. Agents believe the bandits drilled holes into the cement, then inserted dynamite and electric blasting caps. The blast had to be precisely directed to blow through the cement without injuring the burglars or attracting attention. Agents conclude that the burlap fragments in the soil in the vault indicate that the burglars came prepared.
They placed the burlap bags over the explosive, not only to muffle the sound, but also it would direct the charge into the vault itself and keep the charge going into the concrete where they wanted it rather than coming back out where they were.
The investigators discover burn marks on the steel rebar that reinforces the cement. They conclude that the burglars knew the blast could not crack steel and came prepared with an acetylene torch. Agents turn their attention to assessing the total loss. Bank officials report $50,000 is missing from cash drawers. But the thieves were not content with the cash. They took the time to break into 458 safe deposit boxes. Investigators find tool marks on the locks of the boxes and deduce the burglars used a pointed instrument and a lot of brute force to break them open one by one. They carefully sorted through every item, leaving behind what they didn't want. Amazingly, the bandits were so methodical that they got in and out without being seen or heard. In 1972, most banks were closed on weekends. Agents conclude that the suspects took full advantage of that fact.
Apparently they had been in there several times, in and out over the weekend. They probably went in on Friday night, and they probably didn't get out till late Sunday night.
Not only had the burglars pulled off such a lengthy, complex crime, they did it without leaving a single fingerprint. Although investigators do find a brown cotton glove and broken drill bits, neither is unique enough to be traceable. Agents and deputies collect the debris for further examination at the crime lab. But with no apparent evidence and no witnesses, agents are facing the tough challenge of identifying and locating a group of highly skilled criminals, including electronics and explosives experts. Investigators turn their attention to determining the total loss from the safe deposit boxes. It will be extremely difficult since banks do not keep records of their contents.
Ordinarily, if you had a bank burglary, you would be missing cash. You'd go out and say, yes, we got to find $350,000 worth of cash. At this point, we did not know what was gone. It's a very affluent area. And so the possibilities of a tremendous amount of money and material being lost was evident.
Investigators begin the arduous task of carefully sorting and cataloging every item left in the vault. Then, by interviewing every box holder, agents learn the details of missing jewelry, rare gold coins, and bearer bonds. By a process of elimination, they slowly create a list of the stolen goods. The bank's loss of $50,000 in cash pales by comparison, as the value of the missing items rises to over $8 million. The heist has now become the largest bank burglary in U.S. history. With no physical evidence to go on, investigators hope to develop leads by thinking like the bandits.
We felt that they would need oxygen to burn the rebar, and so we canvassed hospitals, oxygen supply places, and things like that.
Despite checking every oxygen supplier in the area, agents come up with nothing.
We also felt that a drill of some type had to be used, obviously a large one, so we canvassed places to find if anybody had sold or rented a large drill, as we felt it would have to be used.
Again, agents go to dozens of equipment shops, checking records during the time surrounding the break-in. But they find no suspicious purchases or rentals.
Or the day before.
Clearly, the criminals in this case have masterminded and pulled off a nearly perfect heist. With no witnesses, no direct clues, and certainly no suspects, it seems impossible to solve. But the FBI is determined to identify the burglars and find them wherever they are. In March 1972, a professional crew of burglars blasted their way into a bank vault in Laguna Niguel, California, near Los Angeles. Over a weekend, they emptied hundreds of safe deposit boxes, made off with more than $8 million in cash and valuables, then disappeared without a trace. Agents believe they are an experienced band of criminals. The case is difficult to crack for the small Santa Ana FBI office. Needing more resources, they seek the help of the larger Los Angeles FBI field office. Special Agent Paul Chamberlain supervises the investigation.
At the time, it was our conclusion that this was the largest bank burglary in the history of the United States. We went to just about everyone in the office. It was several hundred agents, and that's not a typical response, but it became apparent that the crime was a significant crime.
The Santa Ana agents quickly briefed the Los Angeles office on the details.
We'd not had a bank burglary like that in recorded history in the Los Angeles division. Burglaries that did occur with banks involved a small effort, and this was a systematic, big-time operation that lasted over 3 days.
Since the burglars seem to be highly skilled professionals, yet have not struck Los Angeles before, agents conclude that they're probably from out of town. an agent sends a teletype to all other FBI offices, asking if anyone knows of similar bank burglaries. They get a hit from the Cleveland, Ohio field office, where agents have been investigating similar bank heists, 13 of them, in fact. The description of the California burglary immediately strikes a chord with them, including Special Agent Buddy Nix.
We knew from the modus operandi, the MO, the outside alarm had styrofoam spray placed in it to keep the audible alarm from activating, the fact that it was a roof job, the fact that the alarm system had been bypassed were all indications that bank burglary crews in Youngstown very well may have been involved.
The Ohio agents believe the 13 Ohio bank heists were committed by the Youngstown Erie Bank Burglary Group, a loose association of criminals tied to organized crime. The California agents were right. These are no small-time crooks.
Youngstown at that time was just a mecca for organized crime activities. I mean, they controlled the illegal gambling businesses, and they were, very much involved in interstate transportation of stolen property and tractor-trailer thefts, and there were burglary crews that were operating. And there were a lot of very sophisticated burglaries that were taking place at that time.
As part of earlier investigations, the Youngstown, Ohio agents have identified nearly 100 men believed to be part of the burglary group. They've collected intelligence on each of them. Agents send the men's names and mugshots to the Los Angeles FBI. There, investigators try to narrow the list. Since the criminals must have traveled to California, agents check airline passenger manifests from around the time of the burglary. Without the benefit of modern computers, it is a time-consuming process done by hand. After an exhaustive search, they find the names of 5 men from the Youngstown list who had boarded a recent flight to Los Angeles.
That's great.
Emil Dinzio, Harry Barber, Charles Mulligan, Charles Brockles, and Philip Christopher arrived in California 9 days before the heist. The 6th man, James Dinzio, came in on a different flight the day before the burglary. Finally, agents have developed suspects.
Dinzio and his brother, Emil Dinzio.
Agents review the intelligence gathered on the 6 members of the burglary group. All have long records for home and small business burglaries,
First suspect we're going to look
and
at
have done
today,
little jail time.
Emil. So if we get him,
Emil Dinzio appears to be the brains of the gang, the leader.
you need to pay attention to that picture and remember his face.
He plans the jobs and handpicks the team to pull them off.
This is Charles Brockles. This guy has a
Charles
history of
Brockles is an explosives and electronics expert, well-versed in bank alarms.
blown a hole in the roof.
Here in the file.
Agents believe Philip Christopher is a lookout for the gang.
All right, he's known for his expertise in bank robbing.
The other gang members are all relatives of the leader and probably help with the grunt work.
Muscle of the group, Oliver James.
There's Emil's older brother, James,
His face only a mother could love.
and Charles Mulligan, Emil's brother-in-law.
Here, you're gonna really appreciate this guy. Yeah,
There's also Emil's nephew, Harry Barber.
Okay. Why don't you take a look at this guy?
The men are all seasoned professional criminals, well-connected in organized crime.
Mr. Harold Barber, he's a lowlife.
The Youngstown, Ohio FBI has linked them circumstantially to many bank burglaries, but never had direct evidence.
All right, and he's
The
a
charges
lowlife.
never stuck.
He's a nobody, not a heavyweight, but we gotta.
The only information that links the suspects to the crime is that they were all in Los Angeles at the time of the burglary. Agents begin the difficult job of tracking their movements, starting at the airport.
We then canvassed and interviewed every cab driver at LAX that was working that day. That was a massive project.
If I showed you a couple pictures.
Agents spend days interviewing dozens of drivers. It finally pays off. One cab driver recalls taking a group of 5 men to a home in the nearby community of Southgate. He remembers the trip well.
The cab driver specifically remembered these folks for 2 reasons. One, because of the $100 tip, but for the other reason, they were tough, mean-looking guys.
Agents get the address from taxi records and decide to go there. But it is a risk. Agents fear that if the suspects find out they're investigating the burglary, they might skip town. They have to take the chance. It is their only lead, according to Special Agent Jim Conway.
But we had to interview somebody. We had to get our investigation started, and we were concerned that naturally that the rest of them would be aware that we were at least that close to identifying them.
Agents learn that the Southgate house belongs to the Barber family.
I don't have any idea.
Ronald Barber, the brother of suspect Harry Barber, agrees to an interview but is elusive.
Yeah.
We did not have a warrant or anything at that particular time. We had nothing positively to tie him to it. But the more he talked, the more he seemed to know, and the more we were impressed that he knows a whole lot.
Ronald Barber claims the 6 men were never at his house. Agents still have no direct evidence. Yet they believe Barber's story may be at least partially true. They note that the house seems too small to accommodate Ronald and 6 other men staying there. Agents conclude that at least some of them likely stayed elsewhere. So agents spread out, checking one hotel after another, starting with those closest to the bank. Special Agent Frank Calley.
We figured these fellows were high rollers. They knew they were going to get a big haul, so they were going to stay at a nice place. So we were knocking on the doors of every fine hotel in the LA, Orange County area.
It is more tedious, time-consuming footwork,
Thank you very much.
but they do not give up.
Sir, I'm with the FBI.
On a hunch, one agent decides to take a different approach.
There was an agent who figured that maybe they didn't stay at the best hotels, and he took it upon himself to walk into a truck stop hotel. And lo and behold, he found out that Emil Denzio had stayed there.
You're sure?
Positive.
Emil Denzio is the leader of the burglary group.
But they would have been together, all 5.
Records show his brother-in-law, Charles Mulligan, also rented a room there around the time of the heist. Agents check Mulligan's registration card and find a license plate number.
It's Denzio.
They trace it to the Southgate address of Ronald Barber. Investigators now have 7 suspects, the 6 from Ohio and the local Ronald Barber. They still have nothing directly linking the men to the crime. But the investigation is finally rolling forward, and the FBI is closing in. Weeks after a well-planned multi-million-dollar bank burglary in Southern California, the FBI identifies 7 suspects. Ringleader Emil Denzio and his brother James Denzio, Charles Mulligan, Philip Christopher, and Charles Brockles, and Harry Barber and his brother Ronald Barber. A notorious gang of professional thieves based in Youngstown, Ohio. Agents determine at least 2 of the men stayed at an area motel days before the heist.
Okay.
Special Agent Paul Chamberlain is convinced the men are responsible, but he has no evidence to prove it.
By reference and innuendo, you kind of knew who was involved, but you need to have the evidence in federal court.
Agents subpoena the motel phone records and find a series of calls to a local man named Earl Dawson.
Our background investigation concluded he was a former military, a Marine guy with some training in munitions, explosives. And in as much as we had major explosions that occurred at the bank, it became interesting to us.
Special Agent Frank Calley learns of another interesting connection.
Yeah, we're gonna be down on...
Dawson is from Youngstown, Ohio, the base of operations for the burglary group.
So the light goes off again, and we say, well, now we got another break. We got the connection somehow between the boys from Youngstown, the Denzios, and their cohorts in Dawson.
Look, I got these pictures out here.
The agents decide to approach Dawson at his house to convince him he should cooperate.
Over here, have a seat. Take a look.
They show him pictures of Emil Dencio and his associates and ask if he knows them.
I'm your country
Dawson
soldier.
is reluctant to talk.
I was in the Corps as well.
Knowing Dawson is a former Marine, Special Agent Calley appeals to his sense of duty.
Serve our country.
Earl was a very patriotic individual, and I'm a former Marine, and we just kind of played that. I said, come on, Earl, you know, you're a former Marine, you've served your country. I said, what's important, Earl? It's a big case. And he said, what is it? I said, heard about that bank burglary down in Laguna Niguel?
Pictures, I know you know something.
Calley's tactic works.
You know this guy.
Dawson comes clean.
This guy. His name's Mulligan.
He admits knowing 3 of the suspects: Emil Dencio, Emil's brother James, and Charles Mulligan.
Just lost track of my...
He and Mulligan are old friends who grew up together in Youngstown. Dawson tells Calley that the day before the Laguna Niguel heist, Mulligan came to his house with the other suspects. Mulligan gave him $100 to leave the house for a few hours so they could hold a meeting. Dawson left without hearing what they discussed.
Thanks, man. Appreciate it.
But Dawson adds that he does have something the agents might want to see.
He shows up the other day.
Mulligan left a car in his garage.
A few hours of meeting.
It's still there. It is a huge break. Perhaps the car holds the evidence they've been looking for. But before they can check it out, they're interrupted.
While I'm talking to him, the phone rings. He answers the phone and he picks it up and he points to the phone and he mouths the word Mulligan.
Thinking quickly, Agent Calley asks Dawson's permission to eavesdrop, a legal requirement for using what he hears in court. Dawson signals that there is another phone in the bedroom.
Mulligan comes out and he says, hey, has anybody, the FBI been around? Dawson says, no, they're not around. I think I've almost had to laugh myself at the time listening to this. He's playing a beautiful role out there. He's really flip-flop. He's on our side now.
Mulligan explains that he knows the FBI has been asking questions about him and his cohorts, and that they're getting worried. And he's heading back to the Los Angeles area.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Mulligan said, I want to come out tonight and to see us. I'm going to move the car in the garage.
Agent Calley seizes the opportunity to trap Mulligan. But he fears that he might be setting up Dawson
Yeah, that'd be great.
and the FBI.
Didn't know for sure this officer, he could be sitting across the street at the time watching us, for all we know, with our FBI car sitting out front.
Calley instructs Dawson to arrange a meeting with Mulligan in a public place.
First, I'm sure you,
Dawson tells Mulligan to meet him at his favorite bar, the Walnut Room. Mulligan agrees.
Okay, bye.
Now agents have a chance to inspect the car Mulligan left in the garage. But it does not belong to Dawson, so he cannot give them permission to search it.
Okay, keep running.
Through the window, they can see a pair of brown cotton gloves, exactly like the one found in the vault.
Hey, Con.
The back seat is covered in what appears to be cement dust, similar to the debris found at the crime scene. It is the probable cause agents need to obtain a search warrant for the car.
Street patrol or something like that over here.
They also obtain an arrest warrant for Charles Mulligan and set up surveillance at the Walnut Room. Plainclothes agents position themselves inside the bar, not far from Dawson.
We staked it out, so to speak. Four of us were inside waiting, and we had a couple of men outside waiting for him to arrive.
Dawson introduces Agent Calley to some regulars as a buddy from the Marine Corps. The agents have to look natural while staying sharp. Earl Dawson's safety is their primary concern.
We didn't know what was going to happen, so we had to protect Earl.
Agents devise a method for Callie and Dawson to communicate. Either one of them can signal the other by simply going to the restroom where they will meet. 3 hours later, Mulligan finally arrives. He appears to be alone and greets his old friend, who tries to get him to talk about the heist.
I didn't want to be too close. I was across the bar from him. Earl was talking to him and asking him something about, you were involved in that deal down in Laguna Niguel. And old Mulligan said, well, what do you think?
Unable to hear everything they're saying, Callie heads to the restroom. Dawson follows. In the men's room, Callie asks for an update. Dawson explains that Mulligan is anxious to leave and to pick up the car from Dawson's garage.
No problem. Okay.
Callie tells him to go, but instructs Dawson not to get into Mulligan's vehicle.
Whatever you do, don't get inside that car. Okay, don't get in the car.
What Callie doesn't tell him is that agents are in the parking lot, poised to capture Mulligan. Agents finally make the first arrest in the case. As they take Mulligan into custody, they pretend to arrest Dawson as well to mask his involvement with authorities. Mulligan is charged with bank burglary. He does not resist arrest. But when agents try to question him, he refuses to talk. They hope to find answers in the car he was trying to pick up. Agents return to Dawson's house and search the car in the garage.
We found this large motor used as a drill and some other tools that we felt were very much probably the ones that were used in the actual committing of the crime.
Agents recover stolen coins, along with drill bits, acetylene torches, hammers, and other items that could have been used for the Laguna Niguel heist.
Exactly.
And we felt very good about it. Felt we hit pay dirt, we hit a home run.
Evidence technicians ship everything to the FBI lab in Washington, D.C. for processing. As examiners take days to analyze the evidence, field agents follow up on more phone records from the motel. One number belongs to a real estate agency in Laguna Niguel, California. A manager shows agents a condo she rented to suspects Ronald and Harry Barber days before the burglary. The Barbers told her they planned to stay 3 months, but left after only 3 weeks.
No damage, no problems.
She was able to put the day that they got there and the day they left together for us.
It was rented to Ronald Barber.
The men moved out suddenly on March 27th, the day the crime was discovered.
He rented it for 3 months.
The manager gives investigators permission to search the condo, which is within sight of the targeted bank. Agents begin processing the condo for evidence, but initially find nothing.
The entire inside had been wiped clean with some kind of a product.
It seems the suspects were as meticulous there as they had been during the burglary.
There was no evidence recovered at the bank of any value, and therefore, it was not surprising to see a place that had been wiped down. It appears as if they had done everything to ensure there was no evidence. They'd done just about everything right.
But in fact, they made one crucial mistake.
One of the evidence persons went to the dishwasher and opened the dishwasher and realized that it was loaded with dirty dishes and that someone had neglected to push the on button.
The dirty dishes are covered with multiple latent fingerprints. At the FBI lab, examiners recover the prints from the dishes and from the tools agents found in Mulligan's car and match them to 5 of the 7 suspects. Toolmark experts examine the damage on the safe deposit boxes and compare them to the striking point of a snout-nosed hammer from Mulligan's trunk. They report another match. The FBI's case is gaining momentum with good circumstantial evidence and one suspect in custody.
All right.
Now agents must find the other 6 and enough evidence to put them away for good. In Southern California, the FBI connects a team of 7 members of an organized crime ring based in Youngstown, Ohio, to a multi-million-dollar bank burglary when they recover tools used in the heist from the car of suspect Charles Mulligan. Mulligan's arrest puts the investigation into high gear, according to Special Agent Paul Chamberlain.
We did realize that with the arrest of Mulligan, eventually, and shortly thereafter, they were going to figure out that we had figured who this group was. And therefore, we heightened our investigation. We did everything as fast as we possibly could.
But since most of the evidence is circumstantial, the case hinges on the testimony of informant Earl Dawson, a man the FBI must protect.
Go ahead and leave with him, all right? But whatever you do, whatever happens.
Earl was probably the key witness because the case was kind of dry all along. It's physical evidence. Burglars are very dry. Earl was able to put all the principals together. They were charged with conspiracy and burglary, and they could put them all together at his house.
Dawson begins receiving threatening phone calls, pressuring him to keep quiet. The caller insists on a face-to-face meeting to discuss the matter. But the FBI learns the meeting may have a more sinister purpose.
We received informant information that a contract was put out on Earl Dawson's life. They were going to come out and attempt to kill Dawson.
Agents instruct Dawson to arrange a meeting at his favorite bar, the Walnut Room. But don't tell him about the planned hit. Agents want to confront the men to send a message to the Youngstown crime ring that the FBI is on to them. Agents are confident that they can protect Dawson as long as he stays in a public place.
I told him, Earl, don't leave this bar. Whatever you do, don't go any place with this. You don't ever leave that room. You stay right in that bar.
As before, if either Dawson or Callie needs to communicate, they will meet in the restroom. The alleged hitmen arrive.
I started buying Earl some pretty heavy drinks. Earl was basically a beer drinker, but you could see they were trying to switch him up to stronger drinks.
When Dawson starts to look concerned, Callie heads to the restroom.
Come on, hurry up. Get him right out of here.
Dawson tells the agent he's scared. The hitmen want him to leave with them.
I said, Earl, you're not leaving this place with him. You're leaving, you're not leaving.
Agent Callie tells Dawson to wait in the restroom.
Listen to me. Stay right here, and I'll be right back to get you. All right. Just stay right here. Okay. Hurry up.
The agents finally approach the men. They say they know what they came to do.
It's time to get out.
Let's go.
To the hitmen, the message is clear. Stay away from Dawson.
They had no problem leaving. I went directly to LAX, where they were escorted by LA's finest to an aircraft, and they left Southern California.
To keep Earl Dawson safe for good, the FBI decides to put him in the witness protection program.
You're gone. You're not going to see.
Agents then go after the remaining burglary suspects. Investigators secure warrants to search their last known addresses. At one house, agents get their first direct link to the burglary. Inside a woman's purse, they find a new $20 bill. They compare it to the list of serial numbers of sequence bills taken from the bank. it's a match. Special Agent Buddy Nix of the Youngstown FBI office receives information from an informant indicating that these gang members had been known to bury the cash they stole until they could launder it safely.
We identified about a 20 or 25 acre field that we had information that some of the loot was buried in. We dug in that field for days on end, and using picks and shovels and probes, and we finally rented a bulldozer.
The land is adjacent to property owned by James Dincio. After more than a week of digging,
Hey!
agents hit the jackpot. They unearthed several footlockers filled with millions of dollars in cash and bonds that they're able to trace back to the Laguna Niguel bank burglary. Agents then get yet another tip. A neighbor of gang leader Emil Dincio calls police.
A lot of money in there.
He reports finding a cooler buried in his yard. It is filled with nearly $100,000.
Right over there, Mr. Dincio.
Investigators match their serial numbers to those taken from the bank and recover Emil Dincio's prints from the cooler. With more direct evidence against the gang, agents begin making arrests. They first go to Ronald Barber's Southgate, California home. They are armed with search warrants. The only person they find is Ronald's mother. The brothers have disappeared.
No, I don't. I haven't seen him in a few
All
days.
6 remaining suspects are still at large. 3 months after a multi-million-dollar bank burglary, the FBI has solid evidence against 7 members of an organized crime ring. With only one suspect in custody, Charles Mulligan, they set out to arrest the others. Emil Dincio, James Dincio, Charles Brockles, Philip Christopher, Harry Barber, and Ronald Barber. Agents go to Emil Dincio's home near Youngstown, Ohio, and discover he's made no attempt to run.
Because of his attitude and his air of arrogance, Mr. Dincio actually believed he was above the law and was the kind of guy that could make things happen his way.
When agents arrest Dincio, he is carrying $537 in cash stolen from the Laguna Niguel bank.
Come on, we'll call it.
Other gang members are also surprisingly easy to find. Within days, authorities arrest Emil's brother, James Dincio, at an Ohio airport. His carry-on luggage is full of more money from the heist. Agents make their 4th arrest, nabbing Phil Christopher. In his apartment, they discover over $32,000 in stolen cash hidden in his closet. The 3 men arrogantly maintain their innocence and refuse to cooperate.
I got a deal right here.
2 months later, agents nab alarm expert Charles Brockles and get a break. They decide to confront him with what evidence they have and explain they can put him away for decades. They offer him a deal. In exchange for his full cooperation in outlining the burglary group and their crimes, prosecutors will drop all charges against Brockles and place him in the witness protection program. He agrees. Authorities have captured 5 of the 7 suspects. Everyone except the Barber brothers. Authorities extradite them to California and indict them on charges of conspiracy, burglary, and larceny of a federally insured bank. While in jail, Emil Dincio brags about the heist to another inmate and asks for his help in beating the charges.
If you don't take care of me,
Mr. Dincio confided in him a great many details that were not in his best interest to confide. He got this other inmate to help him buy an alibi for the time of the bank burglary.
But Dinzio has chosen the wrong accomplice.
The other inmate was someone who had had contact with law enforcement on many occasions in the past, and he realized that what he was being told would be of some importance to someone, and he came to us.
Hoping to receive a lenient sentence for his own burglary case, the inmate tells agents of Dinzio's confession and the plan to purchase an alibi.
And that was Vegas? In Vegas? Well, that's where his alibi is.
The alibi was that Mr. Dinzio was going to be in a hotel room in Las Vegas with a prostitute and with physical evidence that would show that he was there.
The FBI sets up a sting. Agents give the inmate a contact to offer Dinzio.
Tickets to a show.
The contact is actually an undercover agent who will provide Dinzio's alibi materials. Dinzio takes the bait. At the jail's visitation room, he meets the undercover agent who plays the role of a fixer, a criminal expert in solving problems.
Mr. Dinzio received what he asked for. He got a registration card, which he registered in on. He put his fingerprint on it. He got a listing of shows, and he got the name of a prostitute who he was with, and that became part of his subsequent defense.
In October 1972, the trials begin in Los Angeles. Emil Dinzio offers his false alibi, but the FBI's undercover fixer testifies about the sting. The jury convicts Dinzio and the other 4 defendants. They receive sentences ranging from 15 to 20 years. But it is not over. 2 suspects, Harry and Ronald Barber, are still on the run. Within months, the FBI receives a tip that the 2 brothers are living in an apartment in Rochester, New York. Agents respond, and Ronald Barber answers the door. They arrest him and return him to California, where a jury convicts and sentences him to 15 years. He refuses to say where his brother Harry is. For 8 years, Harry remains a fugitive. Then, in 1980, a woman in Brookville, Pennsylvania, contacts the FBI.
I knew him as Brent.
She tells agents that her friend has been living with a man who told her he committed a famous bank burglary in California,
The other day, only because.
What's her name?
and that his real name is Harry Barber.
It's Harry Barber. Worried and nervous.
The woman tells the FBI that in an attempt to lead a legitimate life, the fugitive is working maintenance at a local campground.
Here, you know?
Agents move in and arrest him.
Hey, Barber.
Hey, Barber. The FBI, put your hands in the air. Drop the wires.
Harry Barber is convicted and sentenced to 20 years. Agents can finally close the case on the largest bank burglary in United States history. Authorities believe Emil Dinzio and his gang committed more than a dozen bank burglaries, stealing over $30 million altogether. By putting them away, FBI agents from Ohio to California stopped one of the most sophisticated bank burglary rings of all time. In the summer of 1988, a wealthy Jackson, Mississippi woman disappeared from her home in broad daylight. The only clue left behind was a mysterious ransom note. The FBI and local police struggled to find answers in its cryptic message so they could find the kidnapper and retrieve the victim before her time ran out.
A daring kidnapping and a bizarre ransom note baffled Mississippi authorities. The victim was the wife of a wealthy businessman. A list of 12 names and a few drops of blood were the only clues to her fate. I'm Jim Kallstrom, former head of the FBI's New York office. The ransom note gave the FBI its first leads, but the case was not so clear-cut. Solving it required the keen insight of a criminal profiler and the perseverance of a family, local authorities, and the FBI.
"6 a.m., July 26, 1988. The heat of a midsummer day would soon bear down on the southern city of Jackson, Mississippi. Like every weekday for the past 48 years, Annie Laurie Herron had coffee with her husband Robert before he left for work. As early investors in oil, the Herrons had become one of Mississippi's wealthiest couples, with a fortune estimated at more than $100 million. That day, Annie Laurie Herron would host her bridge club at home, the same house where she raised 2 children and lived with her husband since they were newlyweds. By 3:30, Mrs. Herron's bridge game was over and her friends had left. The housekeeper finished cleaning up after the card game and checked if Mrs. Herron needed anything else. The 73-year-old woman said everything was fine. Annie Herron planned to spend the rest of her afternoon reading until her husband returned. She wasn't expecting anyone, but perhaps one of the bridge players or the housekeeper had forgotten something. Her husband wasn't due home for an hour.
How are you, ma'am?
I'm fine, thank you. How are you?
Good. You got to see your husband. I have a letter.
I'm about to see him.
No, I don't mind waiting at all. Let me
Annie Laurie Herron was on her own. At about 4:30 that afternoon, Robert Herron returned from work.
Annie, I'm home.
He saw that his wife wasn't home and figured she was out with her friends or daughter. When she hadn't returned by 5:30, he thought it was strange that his wife of 48 years hadn't called or left a note.
Annie.
The house seemed to be empty.
Annie.
Robert grew concerned and began calling family and friends.
Anywhere that I can tell?
No one had seen Annie since the bridge game.
Maybe we're going to have to do something else. Thank you.
Robert's son-in-law, who lived nearby, said he would be right over. The son-in-law said he and his wife hadn't heard from Mrs. Herron that day.
Well, right here.
Robert Herron pointed out that when Annie left the house, she usually took her purse.
I've looked everywhere.
But his wife's purse and shoes sat beside her reading chair. Her newspaper and glasses were nearby.
You know, we're just... I just don't know what to say.
Robert was worried since Mrs. Herron's medicine for a chronic intestinal disease was still in the bathroom. She would need to take it soon or she would not be able to absorb food. The men continued to search for some indication of where she'd gone. A piece of paper near the front door caught the son-in-law's eye.
It is.
It was a ransom note without specific instructions. Annie Laurie Herron had been kidnapped.
We've got to do something real fast.
The note demanded that Robert Herron pay 12 separate men before 10 days passed, but it didn't say how much or where to send the money. He was ordered not to call police, so he waited for a ransom call with instructions on getting his wife back. When none came by nightfall, he contacted the Jackson Police Department despite being warned not to. Officers secured the ransom note, hoping to keep any fingerprints intact. Processing the house for evidence, officers discovered a trace of what appeared to be blood on the front door frame. Laboratory tests would later reveal that it was blood and that it matched Mrs. Herron's blood type. A Jackson police detective interviewed Robert Herron. They wanted to know if he or his wife had ever been threatened.
I'd like to ask you a few questions.
He had no idea who would want to harm them.
It was there for me to find. It's a ransom.
If Mrs. Herron were without her medication for long, her intestinal condition would become critical.
Just hold it just like that.
Kidnapping is a crime that must be solved quickly, or the chances of rescuing the victim are slim. That evening, Jackson police contacted Special Agent Patrick McGlennon of the FBI's Jackson Field Office to bring the resources of the federal government to bear right away.
Under the federal kidnapping statute, the FBI has jurisdiction whenever an individual is kidnapped in the United States. The presumption in this case, of course, was a kidnapping had occurred, a ransom demand had been made, and the possibility of travel interstate is in fact why the FBI gets involved in these types of matters.
The FBI called U.S. Attorney James Tucker, who would advise investigators in legal matters as the case developed. Like most residents of Jackson, Tucker had great admiration for the Herrons.
Robert Herron was a self-made man, and at the time of this incident, which was 1988, Mr. Herron was probably considered one of the foremost financial wizards here in the Jackson area. He was well known in the business community. He was a generous person, so he was becoming well known for his particular acts of generosity.
By dawn the next day, FBI agents and evidence technicians arrived at the Herrons' home. The Jackson police detective filled in the case agent on what they'd learned so far. The FBI set up a satellite command post at the residence and tapped the Herrons' phone, ready to trace any ransom calls. There was little doubt that multi-millionaire Robert Herron was the real target. Yet Mr. Herron hadn't been told what to pay to get his wife back.
It was impossible to comply, or nearly impossible to comply, with the demands because they were nonspecific in nature. Mrs. Herron was not even mentioned in the note. There was no provision for her safe return.
The note did say that the 12 men listed had been involved in the same photography company. Robert Herron explained that he had once served as chairman of the board for that company. Some of the company's franchisees had been sued to recoup losses, but Herron did not know which ones. It seemed unlikely that the 12 men named had kidnapped Mrs. Herron, but perhaps one or more of them was striking back at the company through Robert Herron. Technicians collected samples of all the writing pads and paper in the Herrons' home. They would compare the paper to the ransom note to see if it had been written on the stock from the house. The results would take a few days. Investigators searched outside the house for hairs, blood, clothing, anything that might reveal the kidnapper's identity. They looked for cigarette butts or evidence of food or drink, signs that someone had been watching the house. They found nothing.
And yesterday afternoon,
Neighbors and domestic workers reported seeing nothing strange at the house the previous afternoon, and no one had seen Mrs. Heron leave.
Quiet neighborhood, we should.
The next day, agents continued canvassing the Herons' neighborhood.
Dr. Posey?
They questioned a doctor who lived down the street.
Detective Johnson, Jackson Police Department would like to ask.
He said that he had seen something in the neighborhood recently that might be related to the kidnapping. 2 weeks earlier, the doctor was going to run errands when he drove past a white van parked near his house. From that position, anyone in the van would have a clear view of the Heron house.
Around here?
Yeah, about 50 blocks.
At first, the doctor thought nothing of it. But when he'd returned home hours later, the van was still there. Thinking the driver needed help, the doctor offered his assistance.
Can I help you with anything? Wondering if you need some help.
The driver responded by asking if there was a law against parking in the neighborhood. It was an odd response, enough to make the doctor remember the incident.
Thank you, sir. If you think of anything else...
He said the van drove away minutes later.
Thank you, Dr. Posey.
Agents continued to canvass the Herons' neighborhood and found another neighbor who had seen a white van on the street 3 months earlier.
The other neighbor had seen a van similar to that described by the first individual, sitting almost directly in front of the Heron residence in the very earliest days of April of 1988. She was suspicious enough of the van to get the license plate number.
If investigators could find that van, they might also find Mrs. Heron. But a computer check revealed that the license plate had been stolen from a car at the New Orleans airport. It was another dead end. After 36 hours of investigation and no ransom calls, agents hoped lab results on the note would provide a fresh lead to Mrs. Heron or her abductor. FBI examiners first determined that the note had been typed on paper foreign to the Herons' home. They also compared the typeface to known samples from every typewriter made in this century.
The laboratory division was able to determine that the demand letter was in fact typed by a Royal typewriter manufactured between 1912 and 1927. There was nothing else contained on the demand letter which would give analysts any type of ability to tell us the manufacturer of the paper or whether there were any indented writing or other evidence on the letter.
A latent fingerprint examination revealed nothing, and a spot on the note believed to be a bloodstain was too small to analyze. Although no evidence on the note helped agents, they hoped its message would. The note demanded that Robert Heron pay 12 men who were involved with a photography company. Perhaps the kidnapper was among them. Agents learned that the company had foreclosed on each of the 12 men, all former franchisees, to collect heavy debts. One of the company's executives provided the FBI with company files and photos of those men.
Are you going to have to take those with you?
Yes, sir.
One was now deceased. The others were scattered throughout the country.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
At the FBI's Jackson field office, agents split up the 11 names and began to review the files and photographs. They sent leads to FBI offices in the towns and cities where the men currently lived, requesting additional information. Agents found that many had financial troubles. They tried to ascertain if those men had traveled near the Heron neighborhood when the white van was spotted there, and again recently when the kidnapping occurred. FBI agents across the country began covert surveillance on the former franchisees. They hoped one of the men would lead them to the ailing 73-year-old woman. But as the kidnapping investigation stretched into its third day, only 7 days remained on the ransom note deadline. and agents still lacked instructions on how to recover Annie Laurie Heron alive.
Hi, how are you, ma'am?
3 days had passed since Annie Laurie Heron, an elderly grandmother, had been abducted from her Jackson, Mississippi home in broad daylight. The FBI continued surveillance on 11 men named in the ransom note found inside the Heron's home. Agents couldn't confront the men. A frightened kidnapper might harm the victim. Special Agent Patrick McGlennon hoped one of them would lead to the missing woman.
We wanted to determine if they were traveling even small distances from their residences or business. We wanted to see if they perhaps were keeping Mrs. Heron at a remote location where they might have to provide food, water, other conveniences for her, that they wouldn't want to be too far away from the victim.
Despite the efforts of dozens of agents around the country, they discovered no direct leads to Mrs. Heron's whereabouts. But they still resisted contacting the 11 men directly so as not to reveal the investigation. The FBI considered the possibility that the kidnapper might be someone other than the men listed on the note. Agents contacted the Behavioral Science Unit of the FBI Academy in Quantico, Virginia for assistance. Profilers in the unit are agents trained to determine characteristics of criminals from the details of a case. One profiler reviewed the evidence, particularly the ransom note, looking for indications of the kidnapper's psychological makeup. The profiler called in his findings to the Jackson FBI agents working the Heron kidnapping.
You mind if I put you on speakerphone so we can all listen at one time? Yeah. All right, go ahead.
In the conference call, the profiler confirmed that the kidnapper was likely one of the 11 suspects currently under surveillance.
Which nobody else would ever use. So.
And since all those men had at least some college education, he believed one of them had intentionally misspelled words and used an old typewriter to throw off investigators.
He has a fixation.
The profiler said the abduction was an act of revenge against Robert Heron by a paranoid individual who was willing to kill.
The Behavioral Science Unit believed that a sole perpetrator was responsible for this crime, that it would be a white male of approximate middle age, and that the individual would probably be working alone, although if they were working in concert with someone else, that person would provide a very subordinate role.
It's bad.
The profiler also concluded that by this time, there was only a 50% chance that Annie Heron was still alive. One further detail caught the profiler's eye, a phrase that did not seem to match the rest of the note and might point to the profession of the kidnapper.
The note said, "Pay them whatever damages are owed to them. If any is dead, pay their children." Damages is a legal term. It was telling in that one of the individuals on that demand note was an attorney.
Special Agent Tom Montgomery of the FBI's Jacksonville, Florida office was called in to investigate the attorney listed on the note, a man named N. Alfred Wynn.
After we received the name of N. Alfred Wynn, we did the public record background checks. We also contacted the St. Petersburg Police Department, the Pinellas County Sheriff's Office, found that he had no criminal record, did our own computer checks also. We determined that he was a St. Petersburg attorney and that he lived above his office.
Yeah. What's this all about?
Well, I'm investigating a crime.
An agent went to interview Wynn at his office residence.
So, Mr. Wynn, you were camping with the girl.
Alfred Wynn said he had nothing to do with the kidnapping and explained where he was on July 26th, the day Mrs. Heron went missing. He had been at a bar with a prostitute. He said that on that evening he had called his paralegal back at the office.
Okay. Hey, thanks.
He asked the employee to meet him at the bar to lend him $100 so he could go home with the prostitute.
We got a deal, sweetheart. All right, it's big time. How about you?
The paralegal promised to be right over.
Come on. Hey.
Wynn said he and the prostitute went outside.
Yeah, girl. Hey.
He stalled for time as he waited for his paralegal to show up with the money. The two were in Wynn's car when his assistant arrived. Wynn took the money, then left with the prostitute. Wynn said he didn't remember much about the evening. He didn't know the name of the bar or the prostitute's real name. The next day, agents checked the alibi with Wynn's paralegal when the attorney was out of the office. He corroborated his boss's story and also claimed that he didn't know the bar's name since he had never been there before or since. Agents suspected both men were lying.
We learned that Wynn had paid for the paralegal schooling at a local community college, his paralegal schooling. We had learned that he was working for basically a very minimum salary, and there was a lot of allegiance between the paralegal and Mr. Wynn.
Later, an agent re-interviewed Wynn's paralegal, explaining their suspicions. He maintained that he had met Wynn at the bar on the same day of the kidnapping, though he did reveal something new about his boss. He said that Wynn's legal battle with the photography company had begun when the company foreclosed on him 7 years earlier, and that he had fought the lawsuit with a vengeance. He had attempted to declare bankruptcy 3 times in order to avoid paying his debts. Under a court order to recover the money, the U.S. Marshal's Office had confiscated Wynn's valuables, including 1,000 shares of expensive stock. They also impounded Wynn's European sports coupe, a car the paralegal said Wynn loved. In addition, they put his St. Petersburg office up for auction. On July 6, 1988, less than 3 weeks before Mrs. Heron disappeared, Wynn had been notified of an eviction hearing. But he had refused to leave. The paralegal said that Wynn had been furious, believing that the photography company had ruined his life.
Going to get that date from me? You're going to check that date?
The FBI wondered if the paralegal had been involved in the kidnapping.
Okay. All right, thanks.
We pulled all vehicles registered to the paralegal, friends and associates of Mr. Wynn, to include Mr. Wynn, and learned that the paralegal had a white van registered to him, and through an interview of the paralegal learned that the vehicle was utilized by Wynn on several occasions.
It seemed to be a major breakthrough in the case. The vehicle identification number revealed the name of the previous owner. An agent went to interview her.
You're right, it's just like you said.
He didn't return until...
She said Alfred Wynn, not his paralegal, had been the actual buyer. She said that Wynn had acted strangely. He was adamant that his name not be written on the title. So the woman left the line for the buyer's name blank. The lead was promising, but then agents learned that the van had been in the repair shop on the day of the kidnapping.
Okay, how long was he gone?
It was one more frustration in a difficult case. After more than a week, the FBI and U.S. Attorney James Tucker were no closer to finding Mrs. Heron.
A case like this is extremely difficult when you don't have an eyewitness to any one of several situations. We did not have an eyewitness as to the abduction itself. We did not have an eyewitness that Newton Alfred Wynn or any of the other people listed in the particular note had ever been in Mrs. Heron's company.
At the Jackson, Mississippi police station, investigators again met with the doctor who had seen a white van in the Herons' neighborhood.
Through those and see if there's anybody you recognize.
They hoped he could recognize the driver in a photo lineup.
Short here.
The neighbor quickly picked out the photo of Alfred Wynn.
I'm positive.
He was certain it was Wynn he saw reading a map in a white van across the street from his house in mid-July, less than 2 weeks before Mrs. Herron's abduction. The other neighbor, who had seen a similar van, also identified Wynn as the driver. It was clear to agents that Alfred Wynn was connected to the kidnapping of Annie Laurie Herron, yet they didn't know how.
Thank you very much.
Give me a call if you need it.
We thought, because of the positive identification, that Wynn was definitely somehow involved in the kidnapping. If not the actual perpetrator, if not the man who walked up to the door and actually grabbed Mrs. Herron, he certainly was directing or calling the shots.
Yep.
FBI agents kept Wynn under surveillance. They believed that he could lead them to the missing woman. But as the deadline in the ransom note approached, hopes of finding the frail Mrs. Herron dimmed further. The day after the deadline in a ransom note, FBI agents and local detectives briefed the husband of kidnapped Jackson, Mississippi socialite Annie Laurie Herron in preparation for a televised appeal for his ailing wife's return.
We'll be able to do it. Okay, thank you.
The note hadn't outlined specific steps to earn Mrs. Herron's release. FBI behavioral profilers hoped the press conference would prompt the kidnapper to contact Mr. Herron with instructions to get his wife back unharmed. With his son and daughter at his side, Robert Herron asked anyone with any information to come forward.
As a businessman,
He also spoke directly to the kidnapper, promising to follow any specific instructions. A week later, the plan seemed to have worked. On August 15th, 1988, Robert Herron spotted the familiar handwriting of his wife among his mail. The envelope was postmarked August 12th from Atlanta, Georgia. Investigators were careful not to destroy any evidence that might have been left on it. Mr. Herron believed the letter was in his wife's handwriting, too. FBI lab examiners later confirmed that it was. In the letter, Mrs. Herron begged her husband to do what the kidnappers wanted, or they would seal her up in a cellar with only a few jugs of water. Though the letter provided no instructions on how to comply, for Special Agent Patrick McGlennon, it did bring new encouragement just when all hope of recovering Mrs. Herron alive seemed lost.
When we received the August 15th letter, which was in Mrs. Herron's handwriting, it really lifted the spirits of everybody that was involved in the case. We felt reasonably sure that she was in good enough condition to write the letter, and we were going to get her back the same way.
The letter itself had been dated August 10th, 15 days after the abduction. Yet no one could be sure Mrs. Herron was alive on that date. It was unclear if she had written the letter on her own, or if the message was coerced, according to FBI Special Agent Tom Montgomery.
Certain words utilized on the letter seal me up in the cellar with jugs of water. In talking to family members, we found out that those are not words that she would normally utilize. She would have used the word basement or bottles of water. So it is our belief that the letter was dictated to her.
If the letter had been dictated, both the message and the date could be false. Having to guess at what exactly he should do, Mr. Herron wrote checks to all the men listed in the original ransom note, according to U.S. Attorney James Tucker.
He had already instructed his people to make efforts to determine what financial situations he had had with each of the people that were listed in the original note. So he had some idea at that particular point about how much money had been involved with each of those people.
Mr. Herron settled on restitution, roughly equivalent to the amount the men had been ordered to pay in their franchise lawsuits. The total came to almost $1 million. Herron sent $145,000 to the prime suspect, Alfred Wynn. Enclosed with each check was a note requesting the safe return of his wife. the FBI instructed the Postal Service to deliver the envelopes the next day. Later, agents spoke with Wynn's paralegal and learned of the attorney's reaction to Mr. Herron's check.
When Mr. Wynn received his check in Tampa, Florida, he opened it, read the contents of the letter from Mr. Herron, turned to his paralegal and stated, "This is not what I wanted."
He told his paralegal that what he had wanted was to get his life back, the return of his confiscated car, jewelry, and other property. Wynn sent back the check with a note enclosed, saying he hoped Mrs. Herron would be returned safely. Agents now believe that Alfred Wynn had kidnapped Mrs. Herron for revenge against the photography company Herron once chaired, not for monetary gain. That meant it was less likely Mrs. Herron would ever be returned alive. Although some of the people receiving checks kept the money, most returned similar responses.
Some of the people that Mr. Herron sent these checks to sent the checks immediately back to him, sent letters, or called on the telephone, expressing their regret to Mr. Herron that something like this could happen to his wife. They wanted nothing to do with the money, and they weren't going to benefit through his grief.
2.5 months passed without further word from Annie Herron's kidnapper. Considering her fragile health, chances were slim she would survive this long. In early November 1988, the case was featured on a national crime-solving television series. Agents around the country chased each of hundreds of leads called in. One call from a woman in Florida seemed especially promising. Although none of the names on the ransom note had been broadcast, she said that if Alfred Wynn were on the list, she had important information. The FBI learned that the Florida woman was a spiritual advisor, which did not initially bolster confidence among agents.
Special Agent Montgomery from the FBI. We spoke on the phone.
But after a brief interview, they realized she had a strong reputation in the law enforcement field, having often assisted police in the past.
I recognized some of the information that he...
The advisor told an agent she had first met N. Alfred Wynn 4 years earlier. In 1984, he had his first consultation, asking her advice about problems he had with the head of a photography company, the same company mentioned in the Herron ransom note.
She instructed him to pursue his problems through the court system and take legal means, and he told her that he had already done that and it just didn't work.
That's the big problem. That is the biggest
Wynn
problem.
said he wanted to kidnap the head of the company and hold him hostage until he got what he wanted. He had the perfect place to put the man and said that he was looking for someone to help him. He called her a month and a half later to ask if she would help.
Besides, I can go without risking losing these clients. Trying to get new clients.
She declined.
It's tough too, but
The advisor provided the FBI with records of her work with Wynn. Once assured agents would protect her, she agreed to become a cooperating witness and promised to contact Wynn to arrange a meeting.
Anything else, or if you want to talk to me, if you want to think of anything at all that might be helpful, please give me a call.
FBI technicians would wire her office for sound and video.
Thank you for coming.
Okay, my pleasure. Bye-bye.
Our plan was to draw Mr. Wynn into a face-to-face meeting with her and to have them discuss their prior discussions of this kidnapping of Mr. Herron, as well as any of the other things that would verify exactly what he had said to her during their prior meetings.
Alfred Wynn took the bait. The monitored meeting took place in early December 1988. FBI agents watched as Wynn approached the office. Agents hoped he would reveal the whereabouts of the missing woman. The advisor told Wynn she had seen the crime show on television and asked if he had kidnapped Annie Herron.
FBI one, can you hear him in there?
Wynn denied it, adding that he had decided not to abduct Robert Herron as he had previously discussed with the advisor. The recording corroborated the advisor's statement, but it didn't provide agents with the evidence needed to arrest Alfred Wynn. When Wynn left the office, FBI agents followed him.
We hoped a meeting between Mr. Wynn and the psychic would lead him to, at the very least, check on the location of Mrs. Heron's body, or lead us to a co-conspirator.
But the suspect never went to visit a place where the body could have been kept. Weeks later, agents learned that Wynn owned a cabin in Florida's swampland, a perfect place to hide a body. Dead or alive, agents hoped they'd find Annie Heron there. They had no way of knowing if the house was booby-trapped or if someone was armed and waiting inside. 6 months after 73-year-old Annie Heron was kidnapped in Mississippi, FBI agents hoped to find her in a remote Florida cabin owned by prime suspect Alfred Wynn. A message from the kidnapper had threatened that the elderly woman would be sealed alive in a cellar. But agents found no cellar. The police was empty of anything related to the kidnapping. FBI Special Agent Patrick McGlennon and other investigators continued searching for the kidnapped woman nearby.
We began to look in dry cisterns, some swamp area adjacent to those properties, the outbuildings, screened porches, whatever structures existed. We found no sign of Mrs. Heron, and no sign that anybody had ever stayed there for any length of time. Certainly no cellars. There were no cellars in that section of Florida.
Annie Heron was still missing and presumed dead. Then, in late July of 1989, Alfred Wynn sent a filing cabinet to the IRS, challenging them to find disputed financial documents.
All right, guys, we got the filing cabinet with it waiting on Wynn from the IRS. Go ahead, move it in there. Okay, that's good right there.
But he failed to check the cabinet thoroughly, and his arrogance would bring him down.
Wynn, we believe, sent those thousands of documents to Internal Revenue Service as part of an effort to intimidate them into leaving him alone. That was a pattern that the agents discovered in regard to Wynn conduct in a number of situations. His arrogance was demonstrated in his efforts to overpower whoever he was involved with at any particular point.
When they found letters regarding a kidnapping and murder plot, IRS agents called the FBI. The documents outlined how Wynn and a former girlfriend had been planning to kidnap and kill the woman's husband. According to FBI Special Agent Tom Montgomery, the similarities to Annie Heron's abduction were obvious.
They mentioned utilizing an old typewriter to type a communication, and the first ransom note for Annie Laurie Heron was typed on an old 1920s vintage typewriter. They also mentioned detailed maps, surveillance of the area. They also mentioned that it was actually Wynn that was going to do the crime, and the female was just going to help him and obtain what he needed.
FBI agents tracked down Wynn's ex-girlfriend at the community college where she worked. They needed to question her about the plot outlined in the letters. At first, she claimed she knew nothing about the plot. But when reminded that interfering with an investigation was itself a crime, she decided to cooperate.
The last time you saw him was a few years ago?
She said the plot to kill her husband was Wynn's idea. When she realized he was serious, she had broken up with Wynn.
6 months ago. Mailed it from Miami.
Agents asked if she'd had any contact with him since then. She said that a year earlier, in early August 1988, Wynn had asked her to meet him at a motel in DeLand, Florida. It was just days after Annie Heron had been kidnapped. Wynn acted paranoid, silently handing her a note that asked if her car was bugged and if she'd been followed. When he was convinced it was safe, he began talking.
What's this all about?
Wynn asked her to mail a letter for him, offering her $500 plus travel expenses.
First of all, do not touch it.
She agreed, and he paid her half in advance, $250. Wynn handed her an envelope wrapped in a gray linen napkin. Then he gave her very specific instructions. She was not to touch the envelope or even look at the address. Wynn ordered her to mail it from Atlanta, buy the airline tickets under a false name, and fly into and out of 2 different airports. He instructed her to change her appearance before the trip. She complied, changing her clothes, jewelry, and hair in the women's restroom at the airport. Once in Atlanta, she was to mail the envelope precisely on August 11th. But the woman told agents it was late in the day when she made it to a mailbox. At the last moment, she said she couldn't resist a glance at the address. The letter, allegedly sent by Annie Laurie Herron, was postmarked on August 12th from Atlanta.
Have you seen this
Agents
photograph
showed the
before?
woman a photo of the envelope Robert Herron had received. She immediately recognized the distinctive handwriting. It was the envelope she had mailed.
Do you have on this? I'd like to clarify.
She said that she had thrown away the napkin used to carry the envelope on a rural road.
Thank you.
She offered to take them there once she finished work. That evening, she brought the agents to the area. Investigators knew there was little chance they would find the napkin on the roadside after more than a year, but they looked anyway. They needed it to corroborate her story. Against all odds, they found it. But they wanted an admission in Alfred Wynn's own words. With a solid cooperating witness, agents were getting closer to arresting Wynn. At the FBI's request, Wynn's ex-girlfriend agreed to be wired for an audiotape meeting between herself and Wynn.
We had hoped that Mr. Wynn would discuss facets of the crime, that he would tell her what she had accomplished by sending the letter to the Herron residence, that he would thank her for her help, that he would pay her.
The woman called Wynn and set up a meeting. Agents had instructed her to try to draw Wynn out about the trip to Atlanta. As hoped, Wynn gave his ex-girlfriend the $250 he still owed her for mailing the envelope. Wynn refused to talk in detail about his plan, and he never mentioned Annie Laurie Herron. He seemed to have stonewalled investigators again. Convinced he was involved and desperate to find Mrs. Herron, the FBI knew they had to arrest Wynn soon. On March 11, 1989, the FBI was ready to arrest suspected kidnapper Alfred Wynn. They set up a second meeting with Wynn's former girlfriend who had begun cooperating with authorities. The ex-girlfriend had been wired so agents could record the conversation. They hoped Wynn would say something incriminating about the kidnapping of Annie Herron, so they could charge him and recover Mrs. Herron or her body. FBI Special Agent Tom Montgomery had coached the informant on how to deal with Wynn in this crucial second meeting.
We had instructed her to become more aggressive in this meeting and to basically indicate to him that she was aware that she was involved in a criminal act, that she'd been watching television, and that she now realized that the letter that she mailed may in fact be involved in the kidnapping, may have been a second ransom note, hoping to elicit from him something to incriminate him further.
Agents watched and listened as the woman pushed Wynn about the Heron kidnapping. The suspect soon became defensive and left the car without admitting any knowledge of the crime.
Okay, he's pulling out. Let's go, let's go, let's go.
Agents knew it was time to make their move. The element of surprise is critical to a safe arrest. Alfred Wynn was charged with conspiracy to kidnap, mailing a threatening communication, and perjury for testifying in front of a grand jury that he wasn't involved in the kidnapping. But agents still had no solid proof that he or an accomplice had in fact abducted Annie Heron. In Wynn's car, agents discovered several maps of Mississippi, one with a Jackson exit marked on it in pen and notes in the margin. Agents thought these might indicate where Mrs. Heron's body had been placed, but extensive searches yielded nothing. Securing a warrant, Florida FBI agents searched Wynn's office. They needed physical evidence to prove Wynn was involved in the abduction of Annie Laurie Heron. Their hopes rose when they spotted a vintage typewriter. Special Agent McGlennon recalled that FBI examiners had determined the ransom note was typed on a 1920s-era Royal typewriter, the exact model recovered from Wynn's office.
This seemed to be a very significant break. In my mind, this was the typewriter upon which Wynn typed the initial demand note that was left in the Heron's home. We sent it to the lab, fully expecting them to come back with a report saying, this is the exact typewriter that composed that letter.
The FBI lab determined that the typewriter found in Wynn's office was not the one used to type the ransom note. Agents believed Wynn had planted a different typewriter to bring doubt to later prosecution. They had also found a business card for a van rental company in Wynn's office.
How you doing?
The company owner said Alfred Wynn had rented white vans 3 times.
I'm the manager. Okay.
Each time he had driven more than 500 miles, just 100 miles more than the round trip to the Heron's residence.
Yes, I do, but I don't have a computer.
The rental times did not coincide with the date of the abduction, but one did match the date when Alfred Wynn was sighted in the Heron's neighborhood. U.S. Attorney James Tucker had little evidence to prove his case. He believed that Wynn and his paralegal were lying about the suspect being with a prostitute on the day of the kidnapping.
We went back and confronted the paralegal with this false alibi. The agents and I had a heart-to-heart talk with him, at which he decided that he better tell us that all that was a lie, and that Mr. Wynn had in fact been out of his law offices and out of pocket during the entire time that the abduction occurred, which would have been the crucial dates, the 24th through about the 28th.
This would help prove perjury, but it wasn't enough to charge Wynn with the crime they were certain he had committed, the kidnapping and murder of Annie Laurie Heron. The federal trial for conspiracy to kidnap began in Mississippi on January 29, 1990.
Throughout the investigation and the 2-week trial, which occurred in Hattiesburg, Mississippi, Wynn professed his innocence. But at the conclusion, a jury of his peers found him guilty for the crimes for which he was charged.
N. Alfred Wynn received the maximum sentence allowed: 19 years and 7 months for conspiracy to commit kidnapping. He has no chance of parole from the federal prison in Coleman, Florida.
We have never to this day resolved where Mrs. Heron is now, and the family deserves to know that. In fact, as far as this office is concerned, we still carry this as an open matter, and will continue to do so until such time as somebody steps forward and helps us out with locating where Mrs. Heron is. Family deserves it.
Mr. Robert Heron died of a heart attack on November 28, 1990. In May of 1991, Mrs. Annie Laurie Heron was declared dead to allow the settlement of the couple's estate. The Heron family still hopes to someday learn what happened to their mother, to begin to heal their pain, and to finally lay her to rest. For nearly 2 decades, a mathematical genius with delusions of single-handedly destroying industrial society planted or mailed powerful bombs to unsuspecting, innocent victims. It was a spree of mayhem that killed 3 and wounded over 2 dozen. In the largest and most expensive investigation in FBI history, agents spent 17 years hunting for the elusive terrorist known as the Unabomber.
The first bomb came in the spring of 1978. The damage it caused was minimal, but its impact would be enormous. With each new detonation, the bomber learned a little more about bombs, and law enforcement learned a little more about the man who sent them. Because its targets were universities and airlines, the FBI called him the Unabomber. I'm Jim Kallstrom, former director of the FBI's New York office. Before we ever knew the name Ted Kaczynski, we knew we were dealing with a disgruntled genius. We just didn't know how smart or how angry he truly was, or how far he'd go. But while the Unabomber was carefully perfecting his bombs, we were refining our profile. It was all a matter of who would finish first.
Hey, Tara, I got this.
On May 25, 1978, an engineering professor named Buckley Christ at Northwestern University in Evanston, Illinois, appeared in the mailroom with a shoebox-sized parcel. Professor Christ was listed as the return addressee, and he didn't know the man it was addressed to. Campus security guard Terry Marker cracked, "Maybe it's a bomb." As bombs go, it wasn't much of one. It began a 20-year streak of violence that would stump the FBI and terrorize the nation. On November 15, 1979, American Airlines Flight 444 took off from Chicago, bound for Washington, D.C. As the Boeing 727 reached cruising altitude, the cabin filled with smoke. It was pandemonium. The plane was diverted to Dulles Airport in Virginia. A dozen people were treated for smoke inhalation. But for a faulty wire in the bomb, over 100 people would have been killed. Bombing an airliner is a federal offense. The FBI was called in. FBI agent Chris Ronay examined the evidence of the airline bomb.
It essentially was a wooden box that looked to be hand-fashioned, handmade. We found that it contained a barometric switch and some other initiating components, batteries, wires, and a container for the explosive charge. The barometric switch would function when the pressure changed in the baggage compartment sufficiently to close the switch or allow the barometric switch to function and then actually detonate the bomb.
The use of an altitude-sensitive barometric switch told the FBI that they were dealing with a serious and smart bomber. Rhoades began his inquiries with the Chicago police. He was looking for anything to compare to the airline device. At Northwestern University, a thorough search uncovered the existence of two minor and seemingly unrelated incidents at the university. In addition to learning of the device that injured Terry Marker, Rhoades learned of another. On May 9, 1979, another bomb had gone off at Northwestern University, seriously injuring graduate student John Harris. Its design was nearly identical to the first one. But since they were both relatively minor incidents, authorities at the time didn't connect the two. Dismissing those devices as amateurish pranks, the recovered debris was discarded. Working only from photographs, Chris Rhoades concluded that all three bombs were the work of the same person.
There were construction techniques, the way the wood was cut, the way it was put together, the markings on the wood, the way the tape was applied, that is evident in the photographs, was the same as in the previous cases.
The pipe bombs, placed inside wooden boxes, were all made of ordinary components: screws and nails and smokeless powder and black tape. The components were homemade and sanded to render them untraceable.
Certain components were not crafted as much as fondled and played with and looked at, and you could see they were handled and shaped and reshaped. And it just struck me that somebody spent an awful lot of time on this bomb enjoying putting it together.
The FBI realized they were dealing with a serial bomber, one that was passionate about his craft. In the 1950s, a shy, highly intelligent boy from suburban Illinois named Ted Kaczynski skipped a grade in elementary school. He was an introvert, preferring to withdraw into his room to study, especially to study chemistry. He was a prodigy with genius-level intelligence. His IQ topped 170. He entered Harvard at 16 and graduated in 3 years in 1962. In 5 years, he had received his doctorate from the University of Michigan. As an assistant professor of mathematics at the University of California, Berkeley, Kaczynski was not a popular or outgoing professor. Practically no one got to know him. In 1969, he abruptly resigned. The social nature of his teaching position was too much for Ted. He just didn't seem to fit in. By 1971, Kaczynski had decided to drop out of society completely. He bought an acre and a half of land in a rural area just outside of Lincoln, Montana, 6,000 feet above the society he had come to despise. He built a tiny 8 by 10 foot cabin with no electricity or running water. There he would sit by himself, reading and writing. One of the things Ted wrote was a 23-page essay raging against modern man's obsession with technological and scientific progress. Scientific research, he wrote, will inevitably result in the extinction of individual liberty. He sent a copy to his brother David. David read it and stuck it in a trunk where it sat for a quarter of a century. In June of 1978, Ted Kaczynski took a time out from his cabin to take a job working for his brother at a foam cutting plant in Illinois. Ted's bizarre behavior became too much. His brother was forced to fire him.
Ted, take it down.
Ted had insulted a female co-worker who had refused his advances. Ted seethed and within a year moved back to his cabin in Montana, vowing never to see his family again. Trying to fit in as a social being was too frustrating for the introverted genius. Ted withdrew even more, believing modern man incapable of understanding him. He was starting to see civil society as an obstacle that needed to be overcome. In time, Ted became acclimated to his life with few luxuries. He took it upon himself to grow his own food and to be otherwise self-sufficient. He had few acquaintances, opting for his own company in the Montana wilds. Ted rarely made it into Lincoln. When he did, it was usually to bury his face in reference books in the small-town library. On May 3rd, 1980, Ted Kaczynski rode his homemade bike into Lincoln. He wasn't going to the library this time. Instead, he caught a bus for Helena and checked into the Helena Park Hotel for a brief stay. The next day, he headed west. Ted had urgent business that needed tending to. Percy Wood, the president of United Airlines, received a parcel at his suburban Chicago home on June 10th, 1980. A few days earlier, he received a letter from a stranger promising to mail him a book which, the letter said, had tremendous social significance. Wood placed the package on his kitchen counter. He opened and retrieved a book, Ice Brothers by Sloan Wilson. Wood was puzzled. Why is this book socially significant? He opened the cover. Wood was nearly killed. The bomber had upped the ante considerably with his fourth and most powerful device yet. FBI and ATF bomb technicians poured over the scene. It was quickly identified as the work of the serial bomber. Each bomb so far had been a pipe bomb with similar construction and wiring. On this, the fourth bomb, the bomber had left a calling card. Punched into a piece of rubble were the letters FC.
Certainly, the initials FC were put in these bombs to be found, clearly protected in such a way that they would survive the blasts. It didn't make any sense to have it in there. It didn't function in any way. It served no purpose except to say, here's my signature, here's an identifying feature.
The FBI could only speculate what FC meant. By this time, FBI investigators had already given him a name. He bombed universities and airlines. They called him Unibomb, UN for university and A for airline. Naming him was easy. Finding him would be much, much more difficult. In 1981, with FC their best clue yet, the FBI cross-referenced thousands of people with those initials. But the Unabomber was not sitting idle. In October, a package was found sitting in a building at the University of Utah. It was a pipe bomb. Fortunately, it was a dud. Investigators now had a device intact. Perhaps a component was traceable. It would take time to find out. The Unabomber remained busy. In the spring of 1982, a package meant for Professor Leroy Wood Berenson blew up instead in the hands of an academic assistant at Vanderbilt University. The bomb was made of the usual materials, with the initials FC on the surviving wreckage. Examiners spent endless hours studying every minute detail of the Unabomb devices. The most bizarre clue suddenly emerged. The last 2 people specifically targeted were named Wood.
Wood played such an important role in every one of the bombs. I mean, it was present in every one of the bombs, even when it didn't need to be. He, in fact, if he didn't have wood in it, he threw wood in it, sticks of wood, just so they'd be there. There were references to wood in addresses and names of people throughout.
FBI lab examiner Doug Diedrich of the Trace Evidence Unit is also a wood expert.
Well, the materials may indicate something about that individual, may indicate where he might live, what he might do for a living. And that's one of the things that I was involved with, especially in trying to determine where these types of woods came from, what geographical area, what part of the country.
This approach seemed like a long shot, but the scarcity of clues left investigators with few options. As the FBI investigation intensified, so did the power of the Unabomber's devices. On July 2nd, 1982, Professor Diogenes Angelakos of the University of California, Berkeley, a devoted husband and a popular teacher, noticed a strange-looking object on the floor of the Computer Science Department's coffee room. The explosion seriously wounded him and tore off his fingers. As he lay dazed, he found a typewritten note. "Woo, it works. I told you it would. RV." The FBI ran down everyone in America named Wu, and everyone with the initials RV, a monumental, labor-intensive task, but to no avail.
This is the problem, right?
The note was a ruse.
She's going to have to do it over again. It's going to take how long?
Another lead surfaced the day following the blast. A custodian who worked in Corey Hall, the building where the bomb exploded, saw a man with a thin mustache and sweatshirt loitering in the hall the night before. The custodian, however, was unable to remember enough details to help a sketch artist make a composite. Angelakos was critically wounded, requiring a lengthy hospital stay. He was no longer able to care for his invalid wife. She died within a month of the blast. In May of 1985, in that same building, Berkeley graduate student John Hauser, a captain in the Air Force, noticed on the floor a 3-ring binder sitting on top of another object. Hauser had just applied for astronaut training. What he didn't know as he lay wounded was that he had already been accepted into the program, but he would never fly again. His Air Force Academy ring was found embedded in the wall across the room. Ironically, Professor Angelakos was nearby when the bomb exploded. He rushed to help Hauser. Unabomb-related crime scene investigations conducted by the FBI, ATF, and the United States Postal Service had become frustratingly routine. The recovered bomb components were packaged and sent to the FBI lab for future comparisons. Over the next few years, there would be many such examinations. On May 8, 1985, a package was received at the Boeing Corporation in Auburn, Washington. It was addressed only to the company, was heavy, and had too much postage.
Hey, Mark, look at this.
A suspicious mailroom employee called security. The package was x-rayed and shown to contain a pipe bomb. It had FC stamped into the end caps. Had the employee opened the package, it most likely would have killed him and anyone else nearby. On November 15th, 1985, Dr. James McConnell, a psychology professor at the University of Michigan, received a letter and package from a Ralph C. Kloppenberg. The sender described himself as a doctoral student. "I'd like you to read this book," he wrote. "Everyone in your position should read this book." As he read, his assistant opened the package nearby. The explosion seriously injured the assistant and blew out the hearing of Dr. McConnell. Examiners continued to dissect the bombs. They were evolving as the Unabomber refined his craft. Exhaustive lab tests showed they were getting more sophisticated and more powerful. Agents were frustrated. They were making little progress in determining the identity of the Unabomber. And their analysis was confirming what they already knew. If the packages kept coming, it would only be a matter of time before someone was killed. Hugh Scruton owned the Rentec computer store in Sacramento, California. On December 11th, 1985, about lunchtime, Scruton headed out the back door that led to the rear parking lot when he noticed something. It looked like a block of wood with 4 nails sticking out, points up. The explosion was ferocious, blowing a massive gaping hole into Scruton's chest, exposing his heart. The Unabomber was now a murderer. The bomb that killed Hugh Scruton was the most powerful yet. It consisted of a pipe within a pipe and contained all of the same characteristics as the others, right down to the FC stamped on a surviving end cap. The Unabomber investigation was now officially a homicide case. Investigators stuck to their strategy of keeping the details of the case secret, lest the Unabomber learn what they knew, or worse, lest they encourage copycats. Agents were desperate for a solid lead. Ted Kaczynski was always active in his secluded cabin. When he wasn't making bombs, he was writing his philosophy that justified them. For Ted Kaczynski, technological society was a horror, defined by the Earth's destruction and human beings amounting to little more than mindless robots. In Ted's story, anyone who was participating in the human race's dependency on technology was a villain. On February 20th, 1987, a secretary at Cam's computer store in Salt Lake City looked out of her office window and caught a glimpse of a man in the parking lot, placing an object on the ground. An hour later, the store's owner, Gary Wright, was in the parking lot. He noticed the object on the ground. It was a block of wood with 4 nails sticking out, points up. Wright received serious injuries, but miraculously survived. As police scoured bus stations and local businesses looking for a suspect, a sketch was commissioned from the secretary's description. It was unquestionably the portrait of a man in disguise. The sketch didn't catch the Unabomber, but in one way it may have worked. Knowing he was seen, the Unabomber seemed to vanish. After 9 years of bombings, Unabomber-related incidents simply stopped after the 1987 Cams explosion. The investigation had continued, but all available leads had been exhausted. After 6 years of silence, investigators were hopeful that the Unabomber had either been imprisoned on some unrelated charge or died. Either way, the bombs had stopped. But Ted Kaczynski was neither dead nor in jail. He had spent the last 6 years virtually alone. Content in his day-to-day routine. Tending the garden, hunting, writing, and visiting the library, Ted always managed to stay on top of current events. In 1993, after a 6-year hiatus, several highly publicized events propelled the Unabomber out of retirement. The fiery siege at Waco, Texas, between the ATF and the Branch Davidian religious cult, and the bombing of the World Trade Center created a violent political environment. The Unabomber would return in a fit of violence of his own. Dr. Charles Epstein is a renowned geneticist at the University of San Francisco. On June 22, 1993, he sat down at his kitchen table to open his mail, including a padded envelope which had arrived that day. The blast critically injured Dr. Epstein. After 2.5 hours of surgery, he was stabilized and very lucky to be alive. Two days later, on June 24th, Dr. David Galernter, a prominent computer scientist at Yale University, arrived early at his office to open his mail from the previous day. Injured in his right arm, eye, and abdomen, Galernter struggled to his feet and went out the door for help. The FBI quickly determined that the Epstein bomb and the Galernter bomb were identical. Pipe bombs filled with potassium chlorate and aluminum powder. Both devices had been placed inside a handcrafted wooden box. A few hours after the Galernter bomb went off, a letter was received in the mailroom of the New York Times. It was from a self-proclaimed anarchist group called FC, who were claiming responsibility for the recent bombings. FC promised more communications in the future. An identifying number was provided to the Times to ensure the authenticity of future communications. It was 553-25-4394. The FBI determined that the number was a Social Security number of a 20-year-old parolee in Northern California, incredibly with a tattoo on his arm reading "Pure Wood." An investigation quickly dismissed him as the Unabomber. Another major clue was discovered. Impressed into the paper on the New York Times letter was the faint notation, "Call Nathan R., Wednesday, 7 p.m. The elusive Unabomber finally provided agents with a solid lead. The FBI talked to over 10,000 people whose first name was Nathan and whose last name began with R. The exhaustive search turned up nothing. It seemed the Unabomber loved sending the FBI on wild goose chases. The Times ran the letter, which sparked public interest. It also drew the FBI into dozens of false leads. Disgruntled students, aircraft engineers, even a Dungeons and Dragons club in Chicago. The latest round of activity had sent the FBI investigation into overdrive. A Unabomb task force consisting of FBI, ATF, and postal inspectors was formed to coordinate investigative efforts. Jim Freeman was the head of the FBI's San Francisco field office. He would also head the multi-agency Unabomb task force.
We had evidence that was scattered around 3 different federal agencies and a lot of local state laboratories. So we recognized that our task was to gain control of the information that was already out there, determine what investigation had already been done. And we set about this by deciding to reinvestigate every Unabomb crime.
Every shred of physical evidence that remained from past Unabomber devices would be given to one forensic examiner. Special Agent Tom Monell of the FBI Laboratory's Materials and Devices Unit became the chief examiner for the investigation.
All the evidence in the Unabomb case, no matter if it was explosive related or not, came through me and my unit. In a serial bombing type case such as the Unabomb case, the most frustrating aspect was the fact that we were doing all forensic examinations that could possibly be done to the evidence, and it wasn't able to lead us to any individual.
While the task force struggled, Kaczynski's warped revolution against society continued. On December 10th, 1994, advertising executive Thomas Moser was opening his mail in his North Caldwell, New Jersey home. His wife and 2 daughters were upstairs. He examined a small package with excessive postage from an H.C. Wickel, Department of Economics, San Francisco State University. The explosion was the most gruesome yet, instantly decapitating Thomas Moser. With every previous device in the Unabomber investigation, Agent Monell was able to reconstruct a replica, working only from the debris recovered from the various crime scenes. As with the 15 bombs he had reconstructed, this one was unquestionably the work of the Unabomber. A few months later, Ted Kaczynski prepared for an extended visit to the West Coast. This trip would be his busiest to date. On April 19, 1995, Ted Kaczynski was in the San Francisco Bay Area when Timothy McVeigh's 2,000-pound fuel oil bomb destroyed the Alfred P. Murrah Federal Building in Oklahoma City, killing 168 people. Ted would not let his agenda be eclipsed by the devastation in Oklahoma. The next day, April 20th, the nation still reeling over Oklahoma City, Kaczynski mailed 5 items, 4 letters, and a parcel. Within a few days, the mail arrived back east. First was a letter to the New York Times. FBI Special Agent Terry Turchie was second in command of the Unabomb Task Force.
In the letter to the New York Times, he mentioned that he was claiming responsibility for the attacks on Thomas Moser, Charles Epstein, and David Gelernter. He also mentioned some of his goals and objectives and said that he was thinking of sending a manuscript or essay, and that he wanted them to consider publishing that essay. And if they did, he would make an agreement to cease committing terrorist acts.
The second letter received was to recent victim David Gelernter at Yale, still recovering from his April wounding. The letter was taunting. Dr. Gelernter, people with advanced degrees are not as smart as they think they are. If you'd had any brains, you would have realized that there are a lot of people out there who resent bitterly the way techno-nerds like you are changing the world. On April 25th, 1995, a package arrived at the California Forestry Association addressed to its former president, William Dennison. Its current president, Gilbert Murray, decided to open it himself. It exploded with incredible violence, destroying everything in the office. Gil Murray was literally blown to pieces. 4 blocks away, the governor of California heard the blast from his office. The Unabomb scare was nationwide. Bomb threats were being reported everywhere. The FBI suspect list topped 50,000 names. 16 years and 16 bombs later, the Unabomber had claimed 3 lives and injured 24 people. 2 months after Murray was brutally killed, a letter arrived at the San Francisco Chronicle. It read, "The terrorist group FC, called Unabomb by the FBI, is planning to blow up an airliner out of Los Angeles International Airport during the next 6 days.
The threat had to be taken absolutely seriously because the Unabomber had in fact placed a bomb aboard an aircraft before. It wasn't lethal enough to blow the plane out of the sky, but we knew that his bomb-making ability had progressed enough that he certainly was capable of that now.
The FBI saw to it that special security measures went into effect immediately at California airports. No one without a ticket was allowed through security. All bags were searched. Bomb-sniffing dogs checked everything. The Postal Service stopped flying the mail on commercial jets.
Passengers are questioned about carry-on luggage that they've had. Have you had this package in your custody and control during the entire time? Did you pack the suitcase yourself? Those type of questions all began from that day in LAX.
The same day that the airliner threat was received at the San Francisco Chronicle, the Washington Post received a message from FC, a 56-page typed manifesto. The New York Times received a carbon copy of the manifesto the next day, as did the adult magazine Penthouse 2 days after that. The letter to the Post and Times laid out the terms and conditions for publication and agreed to stop the bombings if the Post or the Times published. For Special Agent Terry Turchi and the Unabomb Task Force, receiving the manifesto was a huge break.
Of course, when the Unabomb manuscript came in, that was big information, and this was a major break, and we all knew that it was a major break, which if handled properly, could possibly lead us to identify the Unabomber.
The manuscript, blandly titled Industrial Society and Its Consequences, was a meticulously written tract against technology, genetics, leftism, conservatism, and modern society generally. The FBI had many items of evidence collected from years of investigating this case. They needed to generate just one solid lead, one that could hopefully break the case wide open. Freeman thought the answer lay in publishing the manifesto.
We very much were in favor of publishing it because after reading the manifesto, it was clear that someone had put their philosophy that had evolved over a number of years within the pages of this thing. It was recognizable. Somebody in reading this, we hoped, would read it and say, I remember that guy. He was sat next to me in class at such and such a university.
After some public soul-searching and discussions with the director of the FBI and Attorney General Janet Reno, the Washington Post, and the New York Times, the decision was made to publish the manifesto. The manifesto appeared in a special section of the Post on September 19, 1995. By early 1996, Ted Kaczynski's brother David had been doing some soul-searching of his own. The news reports that the Unabomber had connections to Chicago, their boyhood home, as well as to Berkeley and Salt Lake City, nagged at him. He got a copy of the manifesto and began reading. He read it in the hopes of erasing the idea that his brother was a killer. What he read sent chills down his spine. He recognized the language and content of the manifesto as being similar to that of writings by his brother Ted. David dug up as many old letters and writings of Ted's as he could find and compared them to the Unabomber manifesto. Both had employed the unique phrase, cool-headed logician. David was distressed, but not yet convinced. He wrote Ted an urgent letter. Though he did not reveal his suspicions, he requested a visit to Montana. Ted refused his brother's request. David decided to call a private investigator to look into the matter, but the news that the private eye brought him was not encouraging. The private eye submitted the manifesto along with some of Ted's writing to be analyzed by experts who didn't know the parties involved. The experts concluded that the authors had a strong chance of being the same person. Frantically, David continued his search for anything Ted had ever written to him. In an old trunk, he came across the essay Ted had sent him back in 1971. David could no longer hide from the reality that his brother might be the Unabomber. David Kaczynski was stunned. The 1971 essay David had unearthed was eerily similar to the Unabomber manifesto. Torn by the prospect of turning in his own brother on the one hand and endangering lives on the other, David Kaczynski made a gut-wrenching decision. Through his attorney, he contacted the FBI about his brother. In February of 1996, David Kaczynski told task force members of his suspicions. He gave a detailed accounting of Ted's life, where he grew up, where he went to school, and where he now lived. He then turned over the 1971 essay.
And then we were able to do a side-by-side comparison between that document that was prepared many years before to the current copy of the manifesto, and it was very clear to us, many of us in the task force, that the similarities were more than coincidental.
The FBI analyzed the essay and found over 160 examples of similarities with the Unabomber manifesto, including common phrases and misspellings. The list went on and on. After 17 years, the FBI had its first major suspect, Ted Kaczynski. Dozens of FBI agents quietly slipped into the small town of Lincoln, Montana. The FBI kept careful surveillance on Kaczynski's cabin as they laid out the case for a search warrant, hoping that the Unabomber would not strike again in the interim. By the beginning of April, enough information had been uncovered to justify the warrant. Among other things, agents were able to learn that Ted had traveled extensively. Hotel records showed that he was always on the move immediately preceding a Unabomber event. Agent Terry Turchi submitted a meticulous 65-page affidavit outlining the government's case against Ted Kaczynski and requesting permission to search his cabin.
We had been working all morning, since about 5 that morning, to pre-position various agent teams in different locations in the woods in Lincoln, Montana, and at a forward command post that we had established in Lincoln. Everybody had a different role. We had also had the evidence response teams coming in, and they were staging at another command post that we had in Lincoln. So everyone was ready to go once the warrant was signed.
Disguised FBI agents and a forest officer approached Kaczynski's cabin. They walked toward his cabin speaking loudly. They didn't want Kaczynski to suspect there was anybody sneaking up on him. The officers asked him to help identify a property line on their map. As he turned to get his coat, the officers pounced on Kaczynski. The suspected Unabomber was in custody. Kaczynski was immediately taken for questioning to a temporary forward command post. Jim Freeman was about to come face to face with the man that had eluded the FBI for nearly 2 decades.
He looked just absolutely disheveled. He looked like he was covered with soot. The agents that had grabbed his arms to restrain him had soot on their hands.
So, Ted, you like to travel?
Kaczynski admitted nothing and refused to say whether the cabin had any live bombs in it. As the questioning continued, the search of the cabin began. The tiny cabin was treated essentially like a live bomb. It was assumed that the place at the very least had live bombs in it, or at worst, was heavily booby-trapped. Explosive ordnance disposal teams cautiously made their way into the cabin. Ted Kaczynski had not been formally arrested on any charges yet. As investigators searched through his cabin, They found enough evidence to charge him with possession of bomb-making materials. They found pipes, chemicals, wiring, batteries, and wooden boxes. This charge would allow agents to hold Kaczynski until a more thorough search could be conducted. FBI Special Agent and explosive expert Donald Sockleben was responsible for quickly gathering evidence in order to obtain the arrest warrant. He rushed to Helena to petition the judge. Sockleben had been working on the Unabomb case for years.
I think it was on the ride back to Helena that night when Pat Webb and I, who had worked on this for so many years, just sort of looked at each other and realized that maybe this was the beginning of the end. That we really did believe that night, if we hadn't believed before, that we had in fact caught the Unabomber.
Ted Kaczynski was detained overnight until formal arrest charges could be brought the following morning. He was led through the streets on national television, looking every bit the part of an eccentric hermit. He was presented the next day before a judge in Helena on a charge of possession of bomb-making equipment. The search of the cabin continued. The room was a gold mine, but a dangerous one. Each container, each book, each binder needed to be x-rayed for explosive devices. It was clearly going to take a long time to search the tiny cabin. The evidence being slowly hauled out of the cabin was damning. A series of 3-ring binders with page after page of detailed bomb designs which matched the bombs used in many of the Unabomb explosions. Explosive powders of the type used in the bombings. Aluminum ingots and aluminum shavings on the floor, crucial bomb components. There was the infamous hooded sweatshirt and sunglasses. Agent Thomas Monell, the expert on Unabomb devices, was also inside the cabin.
The other evidence located in the cabin were electrical components and wire that were consistent with the majority of the Unabomb devices. We found a improvised or a homemade flip type switch that was literally identical to 3 switches that were used in earlier bombs.
After almost 2 full days, the search came to a sudden stop. A package was found. It was wrapped like previous bombs with a return address on it. All it awaited was a victim's name and address for the front. It was x-rayed and determined to be a live pipe bomb. Special Agent Sockleben had to handle the crisis.
Well, from the x-ray it looked very similar to the last bomb that had been placed, the one that killed Mr. Murray in Sacramento. We were able to safely remove the box from the cabin and take it down the hill to where we set up a site to deal with the bomb.
The search slowly continued in the days ahead, and more damning evidence was seized. In addition to bomb-making paraphernalia and chemicals, agents also seized letters, notes, diagrams, and the Unabomber manifesto. One irrefutable link between Ted Kaczynski and the Unabomber remained: the typewriter used for the manifesto.
The typewriter that had been used to type the manifesto wasn't found until literally the last day of the search, which took 4 or 5 days. It was literally in the bottom of the last box that was opened.
It had taken 11 days to search an 80-square-foot room, but the FBI's careful approach had paid off. The man who had killed, maimed, and ruined lives, all the while taunting the FBI, was caught stone cold. On April 14th, the entire cabin was hoisted onto a flatbed and hauled away for further examination. The charges against Kaczynski had been upgraded. On June 18, 1996, Ted Kaczynski was indicted in Sacramento on 10 counts relating to Unabomber activities. 1 charge in the death of Hugh Scruton, 3 charges in the wounding of Charles Epstein, 3 charges in the maiming of David Galernter, and 3 charges in the death of Gil Murray. That day would have been Gil Murray's 48th birthday. New Jersey authorities filed more charges for the death of Thomas Moser. On November 12, 1996, selected visitors filed into a Sacramento courtroom for the long-awaited trial of Ted Kaczynski. In the front row was Ted's family, brother David, and his mother, Rhonda Kaczynski. As Ted entered the courtroom, he turned his back angrily on his family members and never acknowledged them. Opening statements were about to begin when Kaczynski stood up and said he wanted to change lawyers. After a few days, the judge ruled that Kaczynski would have to undergo psychological testing. Federal prison psychiatrist Dr. Sally Johnson spent many days with Kaczynski. She concluded that Ted Kaczynski was mentally ill, but was competent to stand trial. The government's case against Kaczynski was overwhelming. For 17 years, the FBI had prepared for this day. Examiners had reconstructed and preserved every device related to the Unabomber's crimes. With Ted Kaczynski's arrest, they were now able to establish an irrefutable link between him and the Unabomber. Ted's desire for solitude would no longer be self-imposed. With no options, he pled guilty to all Unabomber-related crimes. He was given 4 life sentences plus 30 years. He would never be eligible for parole. For Agent Terry Turchi, the Unabomber investigation shows the FBI's determination to never quit until justice is served, no matter how long it takes.
For the people committing these crimes, who may go on for many years and not get caught, they may become more arrogant, or they may become more complacent, or they may think we're never going to catch them. But I think for them and for the public, the message has to be that we don't give up and that we're going to stay with it until we solve it. And certainly I think that is what we're called upon to do and what we need to do.
In June 1998, Joanna Lee, an assistant editor at Simon & Schuster Publishing, received a letter from Ted Kaczynski with a prison return address. She knew he was the convicted Unabomber, but opened it anyway. Kaczynski wanted them to publish a book about his struggle. To this date, there are no takers. In 1982, a California Highway Patrol officer pulled a young woman over for speeding. He bullied her into sex and then killed her. He then used a decade of police experience to try to cover up his crime and convince local investigators of his innocence. But would he get away with it?
Society depends on trust and authority. It's a system that works, and because it works, we hardly think about it. A uniformed officer demands respect, and we willingly comply. But what if that trust were betrayed? What if a police officer abuses his authority? George Gwaltney was one such cop. The popular and decorated California Highway Patrol officer committed the ultimate violation. He murdered. I'm Jim Kallstrom, former director of the FBI's New York office. When good cops go bad, the full power of law enforcement rallies to repair the damage, rebuild the trust, and deliver justice. The Gwaltney case taxed the resources of both state police and the FBI. He was a cunning adversary, trained in crime solving, and he knew how to cover his tracks.
23-year-old Robin Bishop had left her home in Las Vegas to visit a friend in Los Angeles.
But then you gotta carry trays, so you gotta work on yours.
Robin had hopes of becoming an actress. Her friend convinced her that if she was serious about acting, she had to move to L.A.
Okay, let's see.
Robin headed back to Vegas to pack up and make the move. She was excited about her future. In Barstow, California, she stopped to call her mother and get a sandwich. Returning to her car, she fell under the gaze of a predator, California Highway Patrolman George Gwaltney. Though he was a highly respected officer and member of the community, Gwaltney had a secret history of stopping women for speeding and then soliciting them for sex in exchange for getting out of a ticket. The night of January 11th, 1982 was no different. He quickly memorized the make and model of her car. He also noticed the Nevada license plate. Next, Gwaltney saw a neighborhood boy he knew, a boy who, if necessary, could be used as a convenient alibi.
Hey, Preston, you want a ride?
He picked up Preston Olson and gave him a ride home. A former winner of the Officer of the Year award, Gwaltney was well known for such kind actions. Barstow parents trusted Gwaltney to keep a protective eye on their children. He dropped Preston off at his house and said hello to his parents. By now, the young woman whom Gwaltney had targeted would be well out of town, headed toward Nevada on Interstate 15. The ordinarily well-traveled highway was unusually quiet. He caught up with her on the empty highway east of Barstow. He turned on his light and siren and pulled her over. Robin Bishop had a string of tickets for speeding. She had in fact just finished a year of probation and had been given a warning that another ticket would cost her her license. Robin knew that a car and a driver's license would be essential for an aspiring actress in Los Angeles.
Okay, do you have any idea how fast you were going?
Pretty bad.
Just a little bit too fast. I'm gonna have to ask for your license, man. Okay, Robin, I'm going to have to ask you to get out of the vehicle and follow me back to my squad car.
She left the keys in the ignition and her purse in the car.
Let's take a little walk back to the squad car.
Robin was probably surprised to be taken back to the patrol car, but she obeyed. Unfortunately, Gwaltney had more than a speeding ticket in mind.
Go ahead and turn around for chance on your head. I'm going to have to step in. Kick you in.
For speeding?
Yep, that's the law.
I was just speeding.
Gwaltney stood her up against the patrol car and handcuffed her. As he put her into his back seat, she must have been scared and confused. Why the handcuffs? Where was he taking her? Gwaltney returned to her car to get her purse. At that moment, a car with a lone driver passed by. Gwaltney retrieved the purse, returned to his car, and pulled away, leaving her car abandoned on the interstate shoulder. He drove Robin to an exit that led to a seldom-used access road running parallel to the highway. It was a place he often went to take a break during his patrol shift, a secluded lookout point where he could observe the highway some 400 feet away, clearly from all directions. There, holding the threat of jail or loss of license over her, Gwaltney raped Robin Bishop. When he was done with her, he radioed in a wants and warrants check on Robin's car as if it were abandoned. He knew he'd been spotted walking towards Robin's empty car.
Yeah, I'd like to report a 2829. Yeah, license number 561 FBD.
It was the first in a long line of lies covering his actions for the official record.
Copy that.
Drove her down the parallel access road to a point where Robin could walk back to her car. He removed the cuffs and let her out of the car. Things were working out for Gwaltney. He'd gotten what he was after and was simply going to let her go. But as she sat on the ground to put on her boots, something happened. Perhaps anger replaced fear now that she was released. Perhaps she threatened him with exposure. Her brother was a prosecutor in Nevada. Regardless, it would be her word against his. But then, as he stood next to his vehicle, he was suddenly caught in the spotlight of a passing deputy sheriff's car. The deputy may well have noticed Gwaltney's patrol car from the highway nearby. Gwaltney could not know whether he had been recognized. Suddenly, Robin's threats became more real. How could he explain being out there on the access road? In a moment of panic, Officer George Gwaltney decided Robin had to be silenced. Gwaltney took a final and irrevocable step. Now, there was no way to distance himself from the dead girl. Frantic, he devised a way out. He called the dispatcher and reported finding a dead body, a possible suicide. Knowing he had only moments before other officers would arrive at the scene, he searched under her head for the bullet that had killed her. As evidence, the bullet had the power to destroy him, but there was no exit wound. Homicide Detective Milt Rhoades of the San Bernardino County Sheriff's Department was sent to investigate the dead body found by Gwaltney. On his way to the crime scene, the dispatcher asked that he examine the abandoned car. As the body had been found a short distance away on the access road and was visible to investigators already at the crime scene, the police suspected there was a connection between the car and the body.
I did not see any obvious signs of any malfunctions. No mechanical breakdowns. The tires were all in good condition. The vehicle was in gear. The keys were inside the vehicle. Why did the vehicle stop at the location it was at?
At the crime scene, Officer Gwaltney was now composed and professional. He described how he found the victim, checked for a pulse, and looked in her purse for identification. The Nevada vehicle registration and driver's license identified her as Robin Bishop, owner of the abandoned car he had called in earlier. Although Officer Gwaltney had reported an apparent suicide, Detective Rhoades quickly ruled out that possibility. The victim had been shot in the back of the head at close range, then moved slightly. 4 inches from her head was a stream of blood on the ground. Clearly, this was a homicide. Recent rainfall made tracks and footprints from Gwaltney and his cruiser clearly visible in the damp sand.
In this general area, we found a couple of footprints that appear to come around the front of the vehicle. They travel around in the front of the vehicle and off in a direction sorted towards the middle area of the vehicle. We travel over here into an area about where this bush is located, or right in this general area, and that's where Robin Bishop's body was found. The other footprints that we found
We're leading from the driver's door on the highway patrol unit to the area towards the front of the vehicle and then over towards Robin's body, kind of facing off in the easterly direction.
The first officer arriving on the scene criticized Gwaltney for the profusion of his footprints, a clear contamination of the crime scene and uncharacteristically sloppy work.
Why are you going to do this? You need to come to the crime scene.
Further examination, I noticed what appeared to be marks on her wrist.
The marks were familiar to any police officer. 2 thin marks across the top of her wrist and 1 across the bottom, typical of those made by handcuffs. Then, when Detective Rhoades examined the contents of the victim's purse, he could find no signs of robbery, but the vehicle registration and driver's license were lying on top of the purse's contents, as if they'd been shown to someone and quickly thrown back into the purse.
It indicated to me that we needed to take a look at some type of vehicle stop where somebody in some type of position of authority possibly stopped this car.
To Rose, the evidence pointed to the involvement of a police officer or someone posing as one. Every investigator at the crime scene was either a friend or a colleague of Officer Gwaltney. That he might be connected with the crime was not even considered at this point. An autopsy was performed. The results confirmed that the body had been moved slightly after being shot, and that the bruises were in fact made by handcuffs. The fatal bullet was found lodged in Robin's jaw. Though it was the caliber of a standard police service revolver, the brand was not the standard ammunition. The autopsy also showed that she had had sex within 24 hours of her death, but there were none of the normal physical signs of a forcible rape.
The first thing we needed to do was to eliminate people that had been to the scene or could have been in the area. Other highway patrol officers, other deputies, whoever was in that particular area around that time frame. We needed to start with Officer Gwaltney to begin with because Officer Gwaltney was a person who found the body.
Gwaltney's survival depended on staying one step ahead of the investigation. When he finished his shift that night, he struggled to remove the gun barrel from the murder weapon. It was the one piece of hard evidence that could conclusively implicate him in the crime. Gwaltney knew his gun barrel left identifiable markings on the bullet that killed Robin Bishop. The next morning, he went to a local gun shop to order a new barrel, which would confuse a ballistics test. But the barrel was not in stock and had to be ordered. Then he took his uniform to the dry cleaner and his holster to the repair shop for re-dyeing and re-stitching. All that remained was to stall for time until the gun barrel arrived. In Barstow, Rose held a briefing that morning with the police and sheriff departments to discuss the case. He asked all officers on duty the night before to turn in their weapons so that ballistics tests could eliminate them as possible suspects in the crime. Gwaltney made sure to attend. During the briefing, he learned that the fatal bullet had been recovered. By early evening, Gwaltney was the only officer who had not turned in his weapon for testing. The detectives went to his home and asked for his service revolver. He returned moments later with the wrong gun, his off-duty weapon.
George, this isn't your service revolver, and that's what we need. Your service revolver.
Yeah, service. I mean, everyone else.
The captain sent him back for his service revolver, but he returned empty-handed.
You aren't going to believe this, but it's been stolen.
What do you mean stolen?
Stolen? Well,
George,
there's been some burglaries in the
He
neighborhood.
claimed that his house must have been burglarized. The gun was missing.
have to ask for your
The story sounded doubtful,
formality.
but because Gwaltney was a highway patrol officer, Detective Brian English with the San Bernardino County Sheriff's Department was inclined to believe him.
I kind of empathized with him because we were, in my opinion, we were looking for evidence to show that he didn't do it. It was some criminal that did it. You know.
Gwaltney agreed to come to headquarters for questioning. But first, the detectives searched his locker for the missing weapon. They found nothing.
Then we sat down and we started talking with Officer Gwaltney. And to him, it didn't appear important that his gun was gone, which was very significant. And if I was in his position, I'd have been extremely worried, and it didn't seem to bother him.
By now, it was almost 2 days after the crime. The missing weapon and Gwaltney's odd behavior made it impossible to deny the obvious. Gwaltney was advised of his constitutional rights. Although this made him the primary suspect in the case, there was insufficient evidence to actually arrest him. Insisting he was innocent, Gwaltney agreed to give a tape-recorded interview.
That we can record on tape about the night that Robin was shot. Yeah, I have no problem with that.
He said he'd worked his regular beat patrolling the interstate on January 11th. After his dinner break, he had picked up a young boy he knew, Preston Olson, whom he had seen walking home alone. After dropping Preston off at his house, he was by 8:50 p.m. back on the interstate. About 9:15, he found the abandoned car, ran a stolen vehicle check, then turned onto the access road. Seeing a pale shape, he had pulled over. It was the body of the victim, Robin Bishop.
He was not reacting normally for a person who had been accused of committing this kind of a crime. Had it been me, I would not be talking to them. I'd tell them to prove it. I'd be very irate. I'd be very upset.
Officer Gwaltney had repeatedly insisted on taking a lie detector test. He reiterated his statement and then answered a series of critical questions, including the direct question, had he killed Robin Bishop?
No.
The examiner could find no sign of deception in the polygraph exam. Gwaltney had just crossed another hurdle in his cover-up.
We transported George from the Barstow station back down to San Bernardino for further questioning. At that time, George gave his consent to go ahead and search his house.
Sheriff's deputies investigated Gwaltney's claim that his house must have been burglarized, but they could find no sign of forced entry. The homicide detectives then began their work. At dawn, they found the frame of a Smith & Wesson Model 19 .357 Magnum revolver inside Gwaltney's truck. The frame was badly damaged with tool marks. It appeared to have been dismantled by someone who had no knowledge of how to take it apart.
The barrel, which would have been used for a ballistics comparison, was gone. Therefore, there's no ballistics match could be done.
The gun frame was registered to George Michael Gwaltney. To the detectives, it had been dismantled for only one purpose. Gwaltney was placed under arrest. But the evidence was still only circumstantial. A link between the revolver and the tools used to dismantle it had to be found. The detectives returned to Gwaltney's home for another search. Evidence was collected. Gripping-type tools and a pipe vise found behind the garage that showed fresh signs of metal transfer. In the bedroom closet, detectives found 5 boxes of bullets bearing the CHP insignia. In the boxes among the standard police rounds, they found 27 bullets of another brand. 357 caliber 158 grain soft points made by Remington Arms, the same kind of bullet that killed Robin Bishop. Gwaltney's wife was in a state of shock and disbelief. When questioned, she assured the detectives again and again that George had not been acting strangely or in any way different lately. He was a good husband and a good father to their children.
He's a wonderful husband, a very caring father.
News of Gwaltney's arrest stunned the small community of Barstow. His fellow officers had known and respected him for decades. Despite the considerable evidence against Gwaltney, they were unable to accept his possible guilt.
Pretty dramatic and emotional thing when another law enforcement officer is accused of committing a murder.
Most of the people knew George, and they could not believe that George Gwaltney could have done something so bad.
I recall a couple of the officers that were close friends of his were in tears when I was interviewing them because they didn't want to believe that George could do this.
Even the investigators struggled to come to grips with the conclusion they had been forced to draw.
My feeling was, he didn't do it. He couldn't do it. He's a highway patrolman.
But the evidence continued to mount. Semen was found in the backseat of Gwaltney's cruiser and in Robin's jeans. A critical report was filed by Sheriff's Deputy Roger Kaufman, who had been out of town the days following the crime and had only just learned of Gwaltney's arrest. He described driving by the exact crime scene area about the time of the murder. From the interstate, he spotted a car's parking lights on the little-used access road. Shining his spotlight on the car, he saw an officer standing by it, but was driving too fast to identify him. Barely minutes later, he heard a very upset Gwaltney calling in a possible suicide on the radio. He'd been surprised to hear Gwaltney, a man known for his unshakable presence, sounding so agitated, but had not given the incident any thought until he learned of the arrest. As the investigation progressed, it became apparent that Gwaltney had used his knowledge of investigative procedure to thwart detectives' efforts to collect evidence against him. His uniform had been dry cleaned, his holster re-dyed and re-stitched, allegedly for an upcoming inspection. Any evidence of blood or tissue transferred from the gun had been destroyed. His footprints had altered the crime scene. When detectives questioned the owners of gun stores in the area on the theory Gwaltney would have tried to buy a replacement barrel for his service revolver, none could recall him being in their stores. After several months of an internal investigation, Gwaltney was fired from the California Highway Patrol.
Okay, bye.
Now convinced that he had committed the worst imaginable crime, detectives were still unable to prove Gwaltney was lying. His wife and friends still solidly supported him. 9 months later, the trial began, with prosecutor Betty Kennedy confident that the considerable evidence, though mostly circumstantial, was strong enough to result in a quick conviction. In his opening statement, defense attorney George Porter told the jury that George Michael Gwaltney was the victim of a frame-up, possibly by someone in his own department. Someone stopped Miss Bishop, as he would show, but it was not George Gwaltney. The defense produced a key witness, railroad worker Dennis Gubler, who testified that he had passed Robin Bishop's empty car on the highway shoulder that night. A light-colored car was parked 50 feet behind it. Gubler described to the jury a man carrying a flashlight who was approaching Bishop's car. His description, however, seemed to eliminate Gwaltney as the man he saw. Other suspects, Porter contended, must be considered. The prosecution constructed a precise and elaborate timeline for the jury, from Robin's final phone call to her mother in Barstow to Gwaltney's radio call reporting the discovery of her body. The timeline included all of Gwaltney's known actions and time for the murder as well. The prosecution believed its case was bulletproof. Travel times, the pickup of the Olsen boy, the deputy's sighting, the radio calls, everything. But Gwaltney's attorney countered by producing dozens of witnesses, CHP colleagues and personal friends who testified to his impeccable character and record. He used the timeline itself to cast doubt on the series of events. Could Gwaltney possibly have had enough time, barely 20 minutes, to do all he was accused of? The defense easily challenged the scientific analysis of the semen samples from the car and the victim. The technology for using DNA in the courtroom was still 6 years in the future. In addition, Porter was able to cast doubt on the prosecution's inconclusive tool mark analysis of the gun frame and tools taken from Gwaltney's vehicle and residence. Nevertheless, the prosecution believed the bullet evidence and the dismantled gun frame would be enough to convince the jury.
The strongest evidence that we had in the particular case was the frame of the gun. How can you explain the frame? How can you explain why it was in the vehicle? Why was it taken apart? Why was the barrel missing? Why was the cylinder missing? The grips, the hammer, the trigger? Why?
Gwaltney was prepared and polished, providing the defense with its best witness, himself.
He had an answer for everything that was questioned to him. And every answer he had was feasible. And what their defense tactic was to put a small amount of doubt into each one of the items of evidence that we presented. And that's what they did. And George did an excellent job of tying up all the loose ends when he testified.
In the end, the testimony of 50 witnesses in 30 areas of expertise and all the accumulated evidence failed to convince the local jury. After 4 days, a deadlock was declared, 8-4 in favor of acquittal. George Gwaltney was a free man.
Nothing is, as some people say, a slam dunk. And you never know which way the jury's going to go. You never know which evidence the judge is going to let in and which evidence the judge won't let in. So, because I wasn't involved in the daily routine, I was very much surprised that George was not found guilty.
We spoke to a number of the jurors, and a few of the jurors thought there was a good possibility George was the one responsible, but they couldn't believe he actually did it. And if he did do it, he was a highway patrolman. He worked hard. He worked for the community. He was respected. We just couldn't find him guilty.
Still believing George Gwaltney was guilty, prosecutors were determined to get a conviction. Less than 1 year after the mistrial, Gwaltney was tried again in Superior Court. But with little new evidence presented, the trial ended in another deadlocked jury, 7-5 in favor of acquittal. George Gwaltney walked away, seemingly out of reach of the law.
I was stunned. I sat around for several hours just thinking about it, rehashing what could have we done to change the outcome. What could we do if and when there's another trial?
Arguing the appearance of harassment, the judge denied prosecutors a third trial. It appeared that George Gwaltney could not be brought to justice in the town of Barstow.
We felt, and I was convinced, that George killed this lady and that we needed someone to come in and prosecute George. George needed to pay for what happened.
From the moment of Gwaltney's arrest, the FBI had been watching this case with great interest. Anytime a homicide involving a police officer takes place, the FBI monitors the investigation. After Gwaltney was acquitted a second time, there was enormous public pressure to find the truth surrounding Robin Bishop's murder. The FBI's Los Angeles field office decided it was time to intervene. The FBI knew that George Gwaltney could never be tried again for Robin Bishop's murder in the state of California. But in a federal court, he could be charged with violating her civil rights. By killing Robin Bishop while he was on duty, George Gwaltney had committed a federal crime. By taking her life, he had violated her civil rights. This had never been argued in a criminal trial before. But the FBI and federal prosecutors believed the Bishop murder was a perfect test case. The case was assigned to Special Agent Michael Randolph.
Gwaltney was like a wolf in the sheep pen. The local law enforcement didn't know that he was the perpetrator. He was the person that had committed the murder, so he would stay one step ahead of them, destroying evidence. And this is a significant reason that the locals were unsuccessful in their prosecution. They didn't realize what they were dealing with.
Exhaustively reviewing the crime scene photographs, Agent Randolph's attention was caught by a photo. It revealed the contents of the trunk of Gwaltney's patrol car the night of the murder. In it, he spotted a small box of ammunition. He sent the photos off for enlargement and analysis.
We were notified by the FBI laboratory that photographic analysis revealed that that was a box of .357 Magnum ammunition and was in fact illegal ammo of the type that Gwaltney had testified he did not carry and was not carrying the night of the murder. It was also, we believe, the same box of ammo that was collected from his house.
Agent Randolph had just caught George Gwaltney in his first lie.
We knew that he had lied about one thing at the 2 local trials. There had to be other things that he had lied about.
Working closely with the San Bernardino Sheriff's Department and the California Highway Patrol, Agent Randolph began re-examining virtually all of the evidence from the first 2 state trials.
Instead of handling it as a usual criminal investigation, we took an exhaustive approach, sort of like a TWA Flight 800 approach. Every rivet had to be looked at, every rock had to be looked at.
The mountain of reports, transcripts, photos, and physical evidence would be painstakingly re-examined by the FBI labs and Bureau field agents.
Key things that were used that we sent back to the lab would include such things as, obviously, the frame of the gun. The frame of the gun had been recovered by the local police, and they had done tool mark analysis but had been unable to show who took the gun apart.
The gun frame was sent back to the Firearms Tool Mark Unit of the FBI labs in Washington. Unique in the world, the lab has a collection of over 2,000 guns, from John Dillinger's pistol to the newest military assault rifle. Every bullet manufactured for the last 50 years is here too. Hollow point and steel jacket, 22 to 50 caliber. Like the guns, they're all here for testing and comparison. The soundproof ballistic room allows for comparison firing and bullet retrieval. Comparative microscopes allow for precise analysis of the gun barrels. But the most valuable asset in the lab are the agents, whose long experience in these specialized tests make them invaluable in difficult cases such as the Bishop murder. Jim Cadigan of the FBI Firearms and Tool Mark Unit was brought into the case to conduct a tool mark analysis of the gun frame and the 15 different wrenches and tools, including the pipe vise, taken from Gwaltney's home. Steel tools almost always leave behind some distinctive and often microscopic mark after their use, a signature as unique as a fingerprint. The FBI Tool Mark Lab is one of the largest, most specialized, and most technologically sophisticated in the country.
It was obvious from the beginning that the individual that had worked on this particular firearm knew something about forensics because he had removed several pieces of the firearm that could be of some use later on to a forensic examiner.
Agent Cadigan approached the very specific task of associating the tool marks on the gun frame with the tool marks made by the 15 gripping tools taken from the Gwaltney home.
The question was, could one of these tools have been used to hold the frame while the barrel of the firearm was being removed? In looking at the frame, I noticed near where the hole was for the pin that locks the barrel down, very near the hole for that, there was a small 1/16 of an inch impression, almost as if it was made by a small screwdriver tip, right below that hole.
This tiny mark matched a small imperfection in one of Gwaltney's tools.
In looking at the tools that were submitted from Gwaltney, I noticed that one of those tools, a pipe wrench, had a broken tooth. And the tooth was broken off in the middle, and then there was a small island of metal left on the tooth. And that looked very similar to the mark that was on the frame. So using that as a pivot point, I started making impressions with that tool and comparing those impressions under a microscope, the tool marks, with the impressions that were on the frame, and was able to come to a conclusion that that particular tool was used to the exclusion of any other tool to make the marks that were found on the frame.
In addition to the tool marks testing, the FBI lab conducted extensive testing on the particular bullets found in the Gwaltney home. The lack of a barrel on Gwaltney's gun made a ballistics test impossible. a problem that had hurt the prosecution in the state trials. So the FBI lab devised a test that had never before been used forensically, a radical new use of nuclear technology in forensic science.
When a manufacturer of lead like Remington Arms makes a batch of lead, they throw things in much as you would when you're making meatloaf. That makes each batch of lead unique. We then took over 200 rounds that the locals had collected when they did their investigation of George Michael Gwaltney. We submitted those to the lab. The lab made those radioactive and got their molecular weight, their chemical fingerprint, and lo and behold, we find approximately 27 rounds that are the exact match as the lead taken from the head of our victim.
The samples in the reactor absorb neutrons and become radioactive. This radioactivity is measured and gives a precise reading of the chemical elements in the lead from the bullet, an atomic fingerprint. The radioactive tests were indisputable. Each of the 27 bullets found in Gwaltney's closet, bullets he had sworn under oath he did not own, had come from the same batch of lead as the bullet that killed Robin Bishop. The FBI lab worked to establish a definite match between Gwaltney's gun frame and his pipe wrench, and between the fatal bullet and the bullets found in his home. Additionally, Agent Randolph constructed psychological portraits of not only George Gwaltney, but Robin Bishop. It was important that the federal jury perceive her as a genuine victim. Robin Bishop was raped by someone she was taught to respect and trust, an officer of the law.
This made it very easy to understand the lack of force of violence that was evident in the crime scene other than the trauma. And she was compliant. She respected law enforcement authority. She's the type of person that pulled over and opened her wallet and handed her and stood out and was handcuffed even though she knew all she had done was a speeding ticket. It made her an easy victim.
In the same way, the FBI examined every aspect of Gwaltney's background to gain an understanding of his behavior around women. By questioning a woman who admitted to having an affair with Gwaltney, it was learned that she would meet him at his regular spot along the isolated highway for sex. The same exit to the access road where he had taken Robin Bishop. Every woman who received a summons from Gwaltney in the last 2 years was contacted, and a pattern emerged. Nearly a dozen women claimed that Gwaltney had solicited them for sex or touched them suggestively.
This indicated to us that this was not an isolated sexual assault with Mr. Gwaltney. This is a type of pattern of behavior. When he put his uniform on, he became predatory towards females, was our conclusion.
Witness testimony from the state trials was also carefully re-examined for discrepancies that could lead to breaks in the case. In some instances, the FBI leaned hard with the weight of federal authority.
Many witnesses were reluctant to testify, fearful. It's a small community, everybody knows everybody. We had to let them know that a federal investigation is just not a local matter that's going to blow away with the wind out in the desert. We're going to be here until this is resolved.
This persistence led to one of the most crucial breakthroughs in the case. San Bernardino Sheriff's detectives had originally interviewed the owners of Barstow gun shops for signs that Gwaltney might have tried to buy a replacement barrel for his service revolver the day after the crime. None claimed to have seen him. One of those interviewed was a Mr. William Addington, owner of the Powderhorn Gun Shop. He had denied during both state trial investigations that George Gwaltney had been in his shop the day after the murder. But printouts from the shop's phone bills caught Addington in a lie.
And we found toll records that show the day after the homicide, late in the afternoon, after the briefing that Gwaltney had attended, Mr. Addington had made a phone call up to this gun shop in Sacramento attempting to order a barrel for the type of weapon that Mr. Gwaltney carried that was now missing the barrel.
Now confronted by the FBI with this evidence, Addington admitted that Gwaltney had been in his store trying to buy a barrel for his revolver the day after Robin Bishop's murder. Addington had previously lied to state investigators in an effort to avoid getting involved. Fearing that lying to the FBI was a felony, Addington broke down. Reviewing the timeline of events, the FBI found that Gwaltney had created a false alibi to cover his visit to the gun shop and shoe repair shop where he'd had his holster cleaned and dyed, claiming to be on duty at the time. Gwaltney's story was falling apart. But the most important part of the timeline that the FBI reviewed was the pickup and delivery of the neighborhood boy Preston Olson.
The problem with that story was nobody had ever sat down with Preston Olson. He testified at 2 trials, and he verified what Gwaltney said.
But as the FBI went over the events with Preston and his mother, minute by minute, they realized that Officer Gwaltney had actually left the boy's house a half-hour earlier than his original testimony.
Preston never owned a watch and had never timed it, and nobody had ever done a timeline analysis with him.
This new information and the resulting revision of the timeline was one of the most important developments in the FBI's case.
We didn't stop for anything. There was no traffic whatsoever.
He can't change his story. He's locked himself in on 2 local trials to the local timeline. So the timeline was very significant. It gives him a half hour he has no explanation for.
With a revised timeline, Officer Gwaltney now had ample time, 20 to 40 minutes, to stop Bishop, handcuff her, force her to have sex with him, then shoot her.
Gwaltney knows she's got out-of-state plates. She's an attractive young blonde woman. He zips up the road, takes him a couple minutes, and then gives chase.
Finally, Dr. Edward Blake of Forensic Science Associates was contacted to re-examine the semen evidence from the first 2 trials. Prior to the use of DNA in criminal trials, the use of semen as evidence was problematic. But the FBI felt there might still be a way to use what they had. Gwaltney had had a vasectomy and had it reversed. Was there any way this information could be used in the identification and matching of his semen with the crime scene specimens? Federal prosecutors asked Dr. Blake, a forensic serologist, if there were any new scientific developments that might help the investigation.
He said, well, I mean, science does progress over time, does it not, Dr. Blake? I mean, maybe there's something, and would you be willing to just look into the matter? And I said, well, I happen to know some people that are involved in fertility work, and one of the elements that's involved in this case is the idea that Mr. Gwaltney had had a vasectomy and had it reversed.
Dr. Blake learned from colleagues at the University of California that a vasectomy reversal can sometimes cause the production of anti-sperm antibodies. The body reacts to sperm seeping into the bloodstream as if it were invading germs. The phenomenon is highly unusual and could conceivably be used as a marker in seminal fluid. He sent samples from Gwaltney to the University of California lab.
We found that not only do those fluids contain the anti-sperm antibodies, the antibodies were there at very, very high levels. And that provided the incentive to then explore the evidence itself.
Dr. Blake learned of a new test used in fertility studies. It was called the Immuno assay test and could determine the presence of anti-sperm antibodies in the crime scene samples. Because this kind of evidence had never been used in court before, Dr. Blake videotaped the test to show the jury in the federal trial.
Ultimately, extracts that were prepared from a pair of genes that were on Robin Bishop's body, samples that were taken from the Highway Patrol car seat were prepared, and these samples were tested for the presence of these anti-sperm antibodies, And in both of those samples, the anti-sperm antibodies were found.
During the 6-month FBI investigation, all of the re-examined evidence and all of the new witness testimony led to one bedrock certainty for the special agents working on the case.
We know we've got the right guy, and we're going to get him.
George Gwaltney was going back to court. George Michael Gwaltney was indicted by a federal grand jury for violating the civil rights of Robin Bishop and arrested. He was the first California law officer to be charged under the federal civil rights statute. Once again, he pleaded not guilty. But for the first time since the ordeal began, Robin Bishop's parents had hopes for a different outcome. This time, George Gwaltney faced a federal court and the FBI. It was clear from the beginning that the federal trial would not be a repeat of the first 2 trials. The federal trial began on January 17, 1984, in the U.S. District Court in Los Angeles. George Gwaltney was represented by public defender Carol Douglas, who chose not to have his client testify. He knew George Gwaltney was in serious trouble.
And then he subsequently murdered her.
Gwaltney knew that we were breaking his alibis, breaking his stories, and that he was going to have to concoct a new story. He had painted himself into a corner, and we were going to use his brush to paint him into a jail cell.
This is a frame-up.
As the trial progressed, the FBI punched a hole in every strong point of Gwaltney's earlier defense. The prosecution told the jury that Gwaltney had marked Robin Bishop as prey the first time he saw her in the fast food restaurant. With the testimony of the other women he had abused, Gwaltney's Officer of the Year image crumbled. After dropping Preston Olson at home, he pulled Bishop over and ordered her into his patrol car. The new testimony now gave him plenty of time. Following an established pattern, he drove to a familiar secluded spot and forced her into a sexual bargain, corroborated by the semen stain on the back seat of his new patrol car. As she sat struggling to put her boots back on, the blinding spotlight of Deputy Kaufman's patrol car hit Gwaltney, placing Gwaltney on the access road with Robin Bishop away from her car. Having no idea of who had seen him or what they had seen, he panicked and killed Robin Bishop. Then he breathlessly called the dispatcher with a possible suicide. The autopsy and the crime scene photos showed that he had not moved her head to check for a pulse. The movement was too great. He was desperately searching for the bullet that killed her, one in a series of actions in which he tried to cover up his crime. That night, Gwaltney roughly removed the barrel from the murder weapon, which left the microscopic tool-marked fingerprints that matched the gun frame with Gwaltney's tools. But perhaps most damning in the courtroom was the controversial Immuno assay test. Videotape of tested samples from Robin's jeans and the car seat show the tiny beads attaching themselves to the sperm.
What you can see in these videotapes for the appropriate specimens, that is, specimens that contain the anti-sperm antibody, is the final stage of the analysis.
Live sperm were shown swimming through the medium with the beads attached, indicating that the antibodies were present in both specimens. Dr. Blake was allowed by the judge only to indicate percentage results of his testing. He testified that Gwaltney's blood type put him in 12% of the population. Of that 12%, only 5% of those would test positive for the presence of anti-sperm antibodies. Less than 1% of the population could possibly have had sexual intercourse with Robin Bishop that night. As much as the defense might argue that the rest of the evidence was circumstantial, the scientific evidence was overpowering. The verdict was returned swiftly.
When the jury walked in, they would not look at Gwaltney, and it was very clear that they had a guilty verdict.
As far as I was concerned, I was pleased and that George had to suffer the consequences of his action, and that Robin Bishop His death didn't go uninvestigated.
It was, it's a case you'll never forget.
You took advantage of a vulnerable person.
The judge gave George Gwaltney the stiffest possible sentence, a maximum federal prison term of 90 years and a minimum term of 30 years before becoming eligible for parole.
Mr. Gwaltney, you have
12 years
betrayed your
later,
badge.
George Gwaltney died in prison of a heart attack. To the end, he claimed he was innocent and had been the victim of a frame-up.